I've seen a lot of strange things in my life, things that make you question what you thought you knew about the world. But nothing, absolutely nothing, has ever stuck with me quite like the day I found the stream that flowed backwards. It happened years ago, back when I was a younger man, maybe 28 or 29. I was a park ranger then, stationed up in the Gray Peaks National Forest, a wild, beautiful stretch of land that most folks only ever saw from a distance. My job was my life, and I loved it. Solitude didn't bother me. In fact, I sought it out. I knew those mountains like the back of my hand, every trail, every hidden grove, every gurgling creek, or so I thought. That spring had been particularly wet, the kind of persistent, drizzly rain that turned every footpath into a muddy ribbon and made the forest smell thick with damp earth and pine needles. The rivers were high, swollen, and fast, and the smaller creeks were roaring. My patrol that day was a routine one, checking boundary markers on the far eastern edge of the preserve. It was a long trek, one I usually broke into 2 days, but I was feeling ambitious, maybe a little overconfident. I wanted to push through and be back at the station by nightfall. That was my first mistake. Always listen to the little voice that tells you to slow down. I set out before dawn, the air crisp and cold, mist clinging to the ancient trees. The hike was tough, climbing higher and higher into the less traveled parts of the peaks. I'd packed light, a small rucksack with some water, a few energy bars, a topo map, and my radio. Pretty standard gear for a ranger in familiar territory. The sun eventually burned off the morning fog, revealing a sky of brilliant blue, but the ground remained slick. I remember thinking how quiet it was up there, even for the mountains. No chirping birds, no rustling leaves in the wind, just the steady crunch of my boots on pine needles and the distant roar of a larger river. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, not peaceful. Around mid-afternoon, I found myself off my usual route. Nothing major, just a slight deviation caused by a recent landslide that had taken out a section of the path. I figured I could cut through a small gully and rejoin the trail a few hundred yards down. It wasn't the smartest move, going cross-country in unfamiliar terrain, but I was running behind schedule and didn't want to backtrack. That was my second mistake, driven by that earlier ambition. As I navigated through a particularly dense patch of old growth, the air grew noticeably colder, even though the sun was still high. I spotted a narrow creek, probably no more than 4 or 5 feet wide, gurgling over moss-covered stones. It wasn't on my map, too small, likely seasonal. I knelt down, grateful for the chance to rest my legs for a moment and take a drink. The water was shockingly cold, clear as glass. I watched a few fallen leaves, recent casualties of the changing season, drift on its surface. And that's when I saw it, the first flicker of something wrong. A vibrant red maple leaf, perfectly intact, bobbing in the current. But it wasn't moving downstream, following the natural slope of the mountain, which was clearly visible to my left. No, this leaf was slowly, undeniably moving up the incline. It defied gravity, defying everything I knew about how water behaves. My breath hitched. It was just a leaf. It had to be. But my gut, that primal part of me that had been honed by years in the wilderness, felt a sudden, sharp jolt of dread. Something here was profoundly, impossibly wrong. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A leaf, just a leaf. The wind could be playing tricks, creating an eddy, a circular current that made it appear to be moving against the flow. I leaned closer, my eyes fixed on the small, crimson beacon. It was definitely moving. Slowly, deliberately, it edged its way over a smooth, gray stone, then around a cluster of dark green moss. Upstream, unmistakably. I reached out a trembling hand, scooped up a handful of water, and splashed it gently into the current just a foot or so downstream from the leaf. The ripples spread, then settled. The leaf continued its impossible journey. I found a small, dry twig about 3 inches long, light as a feather, and dropped it into the water a few feet below where the maple leaf now rested, momentarily caught on a submerged pebble. The twig immediately began to drift upstream, bumping against the same pebble, then slowly working its way free to continue its ascent. This wasn't an eddy, this wasn't a trick of the light, this was real, and it was impossible. My mind raced, cycling through every natural phenomenon I'd ever learned about. Capillary action? No, that was for tiny spaces, and this was an open stream. Underground currents pushing water back up? Nonsense. Water flows downhill. Always. Gravity is a fundamental law. But here, in this forgotten corner of the gray peaks, gravity seemed to be taking a vacation. A cold dread, far deeper than the mountain air, began to seep into my bones. This wasn't just strange, it was fundamentally wrong. My ranger training, all my years of wilderness experience, offered no explanation. It was like looking at the sky and seeing the sun rise in the west. My rational brain screamed for a logical answer, but my primal instincts, honed by countless solitary days in the wild, screamed something else entirely: danger. I stood up slowly, my gaze sweeping the immediate surroundings. The dense patch of old growth seemed even denser now, the shadows deeper. The silence that had struck me earlier now felt oppressive, suffocating. Where were the birds, the squirrels? Even the distant drone of insects was absent. It was as if the forest itself held its breath, waiting. My first instinct was to backtrack, to get away from this impossible place, to dismiss it as some hallucination brought on by fatigue or perhaps a bump to the head. But curiosity, a powerful, dangerous thing, took root. I had to know, I had to understand. How far did this go? Where did it begin? I pulled out my topo map again, unfolded it with hands that were less steady than I liked. I pinpointed my estimated location, noting the stream wasn't marked. No surprise there, most small seasonal creeks weren't. But this wasn't just a small creek, it was a phenomenon. I had to mark it, if only for my own sanity. I pulled a pencil from my pack and made a small X on the map, then drew a faint line tracing the stream's path upstream against the contours. Taking a deep breath, I started walking, following the impossible current. Each step felt heavy, deliberate. My eyes darted from the water to the surrounding woods, searching for anything else out of place. The stream itself was unremarkable, clear, cold water gurgling over smooth stones and moss. It wound its way through towering ancient pines and hemlocks, their branches interwoven overhead, creating a perpetual twilight on the forest floor. The incline became steeper, yet the water continued to flow upwards. I watched another leaf, a vibrant yellow one this time, slowly ascending, catching on small obstacles, then freeing itself, patiently working its way against the natural slope. It was mesmerizing, terrifying. As I climbed higher, the air grew even colder, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum began to vibrate in the air. It wasn't a sound I could pinpoint, more like a pressure, a vibration against my eardrums. It was subtle at first, easily dismissed as tinnitus or the blood rushing in my ears, but it persisted, growing in intensity the further I went. The trees here were different, too, taller perhaps, but also something else. Their bark seemed darker, almost black in places, and the moss that clung to their trunks was a deeper, more unnerving shade of green. The undergrowth was sparse, as if nothing dared to grow too close to the ground here. It was an ancient, silent place, and I felt like a trespasser. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I checked my watch. Only 20 minutes had passed since I first saw the leaf. My internal clock was off, distorted by the unnerving reality of the stream. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. This was unprecedented. This defied science. As a ranger, I was a guardian of the wilderness, and this was a wound, a tear in the fabric of what the wilderness was supposed to be. The hum grew stronger, a low thrumming that seemed to resonate in my chest. I could feel it now, a physical sensation. My teeth started to ache faintly. The air tasted metallic, like ozone right before a thunderstorm, but there was no storm. The sky, visible in patches through the canopy, was still a brilliant, impossible blue. The stream curved sharply around a massive outcrop of gray rock, slick with perpetual moisture. As I rounded it, I stopped dead. Before me, the stream widened slightly into a small, perfectly circular pool, no more than 10 feet across. And in the center of that pool, hovering maybe a foot above the water's surface, was a stone. It wasn't just any stone. It was a smooth, obsidian black oval, about the size of a football. It pulsed with a faint, deep purple light, a slow, rhythmic throb that perfectly matched the hum I felt in my chest. The stream didn't flow into the pool and then out. It seemed to emanate from the stone itself. The water in the pool swirled gently, not in a chaotic fashion, but in a slow, deliberate counterclockwise motion. And from the edge of that swirl, the stream emerged, flowing uphill against all logic, against all natural law. My jaw hung open. This was the source. This floating, pulsating stone was the impossible heart of the impossible stream. I stared, mesmerized and terrified. The air around the stone shimmered faintly, a heat haze that defied the cold, damp forest. I could feel a static charge building on my skin, making the hairs on my arms prickle. It was beautiful in a terrible, alien way. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave. This was beyond my pay grade, beyond human comprehension. This was something ancient, something otherworldly, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. The purple light called to me, a silent, hypnotic siren. Slowly, carefully, I took another step forward, then another, drawn by an invisible cord. The hum intensified, becoming a low drone that vibrated through my bones. My head began to throb in time with the stone's pulse. I felt an odd pressure in my ears, like being deep underwater. I reached the edge of the pool. The water was unnaturally still at the immediate perimeter, then began its slow, deliberate swirl towards the center where the stone hovered. I could see the individual molecules of water almost. It was unnaturally clear, sparkling with tiny, unseen motes of light that seemed to mirror the stone's internal pulse. What was it? A meteor? Some kind of geological anomaly? My scientific mind struggled, grasping for any explanation that didn't involve magic or madness. But there was no explanation. This was an object suspended in defiance of gravity, emitting light and energy, and reversing the flow of a natural stream. My radio, clipped to my shoulder strap, suddenly crackled. I jumped, startled, nearly dropping my pack. The sudden, mundane sound was jarring in this otherworldly silence. Ranger Miller, this is base. Do you copy, Ranger Miller? It was Henderson, my senior colleague, his voice tinny and distant, yet a lifeline back to the world I understood. I fumbled for the radio, my hands shaking. Base, this is Ranger Miller, I copy. My voice sounded hoarse, barely a whisper. Miller, where are you? You're well past your scheduled check-in. You okay? We're getting some weird atmospheric interference on your grid. Static, you reading us clear. Atmospheric interference, that was the hum, that was the pressure. I'm not sure, Henderson, I stammered, my eyes still fixed on the pulsating stone. I'm off my planned route. I found something. Found something? What is it? You sound out of breath. Everything all right? Henderson's tone shifted, a hint of concern entering his voice. No, everything's not all right, I admitted, the words tumbling out. I found a stream, it's flowing backwards, uphill, and there's something at the source. There was a beat of silence on the other end, then a low chuckle. All right, Miller, you having a bit of fun out there, lost your way and found some trick of the light, or maybe you hit your head. No, Henderson, I'm serious. This is real. There's a stone. It's floating in the middle of a pool. It's black obsidian and it's pulsing with purple light. It's generating the stream. I'm getting a strange energy reading, a hum, a static charge. I was speaking quickly now, trying to convey the impossible reality of it all. Another pause. This time it wasn't humorous. A floating stone, purple light. Miller, are you sure you're okay? Your coordinates are jumping all over the place on our end, and the static is getting worse. Are you injured? Are you disoriented? I'm not injured, Henderson. I don't know what I'm seeing. It defies everything. I need someone to see this. I need backup. The words felt desperate, even to my own ears. Backup for what, Miller? A floating rock. Look, I think you need to turn around and head back to a familiar trail. You're deep in the restricted sector, according to our latest ping, far from where you should be. We've got a storm brewing, too. Get out of there. Henderson's voice was firm now, disciplinary. Restricted sector? I frowned, glancing at my map. I was definitely off trail, but not that far off. The gray peaks had designated restricted areas, usually around unstable geological zones or sensitive wildlife habitats, but I wasn't aware of any near my eastern boundary patrol. Henderson, I'm telling you, this isn't a joke. This isn't a trick. This is something monumental. I can send you my precise coordinates now, but they might be off because of the interference. I tried to sound calm, professional, but my voice still trembled. Miller, listen to me. Your pings are showing you in an old section, one we haven't mapped properly in years. It's unstable, and that storm front is moving in fast. We're losing you. The signal is breaking up. Get out of there. Head southeast back towards the main trail. Do you copy, Miller? The radio crackled violently, the static overwhelming Henderson's voice. Then silence, utter chilling silence. My lifeline was gone. I stood there holding the dead radio, the silence of the ancient forest pressing in on me, amplified by the throbbing hum of the stone. Alone, completely alone with this impossible thing. A tremor went through the ground. It was faint, barely perceptible, but I felt it, a low rumble deep beneath my feet. Not an earthquake, not exactly. More like a resonant vibration matching the stone's pulse. I looked at the stone again. Its purple light seemed to intensify slightly, and the hum grew louder, a deep bass note that vibrated through my very bones. The air around it felt charged, almost alive. Against my better judgment, I extended my hand, drawn by an irresistible force, just to feel the energy, just to touch the shimmering air around it. My fingers tingled with static electricity as they approached the boundary of the pool. As my hand neared the water, a faint, iridescent ripple spread from the center of the pool, emanating from the stone itself. It reached the edge where my fingertips hovered, and the water responded. It didn't splash or part, it seemed to draw my hand in, a gentle, almost loving suction. A jolt went through me as my fingertips broke the surface of the water. It wasn't cold like the stream, it was warm, almost body temperature, and strangely viscous like liquid silk. A wave of dizziness washed over me and my vision blurred for a moment. I felt a pulling sensation, a gentle tug, as if the water itself wanted to embrace my hand to draw me in. And then I saw something in the water reflected in its impossibly clear depths. Not my own reflection, not the trees, something else. Images flashed through my mind, not my memories, but something alien, something vast and ancient. I saw swirling nebulae, distant stars, planets forming in fiery birth. I saw strange, geometric patterns shifting and transforming, intricate and beautiful, yet utterly beyond human comprehension. I saw towering structures of light, impossible cities built on nothing, floating in a vacuum. I felt a sense of immense age, of countless millennia, of time stretching further than my mind could grasp. It was too much, my brain reeled. A scream tried to escape my throat, but it was caught, trapped by the overwhelming sensations. This wasn't just a stone, it was a window, a gateway, a repository of something ancient and cosmic. My knees buckled. I pulled my hand back instinctively, tearing it from the water's gentle hold. The images vanished, replaced by the familiar, yet now terrifying, reality of the Gray Peaks forest. The dizziness receded, leaving behind a pounding headache and a profound sense of disorientation. I scrambled backward, away from the pool, away from the stone, tripping over roots and landing hard on my backside. My heart was a drum corps gone wild in my chest. Sweat plastered my hair to my forehead, despite the cold. What was that? What did I just see? Was I going mad? Was this some kind of psychic attack? Some energy emanating from the stone that was twisting my perception, forcing visions into my mind. I forced myself to breathe deep, ragged gasps. The metallic taste in my mouth was stronger now, and my teeth ached with renewed intensity. The hum was still there, a constant companion, a reminder of the impossible anomaly before me. The stone pulsed calmly, serenely, as if nothing had happened, as if it hadn't just reached into my mind and shown me things that should not be seen by human eyes. A panic threatened to overwhelm me. This wasn't just a physical anomaly, it was something that touched the very essence of reality, of consciousness. I was in danger, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually. I had to get away now, no more scientific curiosity, no more ranger duty. This was beyond me, beyond anyone. I pushed myself to my feet, my legs wobbly. I turned, not bothering to look at the stone again, and started to retrace my steps, forcing myself into a clumsy run. The strange stream, flowing uphill, seemed to mock me as I stumbled past it, trying desperately to go downhill. The hum still followed me, a persistent vibration. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves in the wind, which now, belatedly, seemed to have returned, made me jump. I was acutely aware of the silence of the animal world, the absence of life in this cursed sector of the forest. I didn't look back, I just ran. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed, but I pushed on, adrenaline coursing through me. I just needed to get back to the normal world, to the trails, to the familiar roar of the main river, to Henderson's dismissive, normal voice. The trees seemed to press in closer, their ancient forms morphing into accusing silhouettes in my peripheral vision. I imagined eyes watching me from the shadows, the silence broken only by my own ragged breathing and the distant, maddening hum. I ran for what felt like an eternity, but it couldn't have been more than an hour. The light was beginning to fade, the sky overhead turning from brilliant blue to a bruised purple-gray. Henderson's warning about a storm was coming true. The air grew heavy, thick with impending rain. Finally, I burst out of the dense old growth onto a patch of familiar, less overgrown forest. The stream was gone. The hum was fainter now, a ghost of its former intensity, slowly fading into the background noise of the returning wilderness. A bird chirped somewhere in the distance. A squirrel chattered from a tree branch. Normalcy, sweet and desperately longed for, began to creep back into the world. I stopped, leaning against a sturdy pine, gasping for air, hands on my knees. My body ached, but my mind was in turmoil. What had I seen? What had I experienced? The memory of the impossible stream, the floating stone, the cosmic visions, they were vivid, terrifyingly real. My rational mind tried to reassert itself, to dismiss it as a hallucination, a stress-induced psychosis. But I knew it was real. I had seen the leaf, the twig, defied gravity. I had felt the hum, the static. I had touched the water and seen infinity. I pulled out my map again, unfolded it with hands that still trembled. My earlier X and drawn line for the stream. It was right there, a physical reminder. I pulled out my compass. Southeast. Henderson said southeast. I forced myself to focus. I was still off trail, still hours from the station, and a storm was indeed brewing. I needed shelter, and I needed to report this, no matter how unbelievable it sounded. But how could I? Who would believe me? A floating, pulsating black stone that showed cosmic visions and reversed gravity. They'd think I'd gone mad. They'd revoke my ranger status, maybe even send me for psychiatric evaluation. The thought of sharing this burden, this impossibility, was almost as terrifying as the experience itself. I made a decision. I wouldn't report it yet, not everything, not the visions, not the full impossible truth. I would report finding an unusual geological anomaly, a strange energy signature, perhaps a previously unmapped feature. I would report the stream, perhaps, if I could find a way to frame it that didn't sound like a fairy tale. I would keep the core mind-bending truth to myself for now, until I could process it, until I could understand. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall, pattering on the pine needles around me, dark spots appearing on my jacket. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees with a mournful sigh. The sky had turned a bruised, oppressive gray, heavy with moisture. I had to move. I consulted my map again, looking for any sign of a known trail, a shelter, anything. I was deeper into the forest than I'd ever intended to be, even without the bizarre detour. Henderson's warning about the restricted sector and unstable ground echoed in my ears. Was that connected? Was the Park Service aware of something? Did they know about the stone? Were they covering it up? Or was Henderson just being dismissive of my wild story? I had to get back to the station. I had to get back to civilization. I needed a hot meal, a warm bed, and a long, long silence to try and put the pieces of my shattered reality back together. But even as I thought it, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The world I thought I knew was gone, replaced by something far stranger, far more terrifying. The rain intensified, coming down in sheets, turning the forest floor into a slick, muddy mess. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a deep, guttural growl that shook the ancient trees. The light was almost gone now, swallowed by the storm and the encroaching night. I pulled my hood up, adjusted my pack, and started walking again, faster this time, driven by the storm and the lingering dread of the impossible. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see a shimmering purple light through the trees or hear the impossible flow of water defying gravity. But there was nothing, only the rising wind and the relentless rain. I hiked through the deluge, my every muscle screaming in protest, my mind a chaotic whirlwind of impossible images and unanswered questions. The forest was alive with the storm now, branches swaying wildly, rain lashing down, turning the world into a blur of gray and green. My sense of direction, usually infallible, felt compromised. The compass still pointed north, but my internal compass, the one that had always guided me through these woods, felt broken. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper of cosmic secrets. Hours later, completely soaked and shivering, I stumbled upon a small, dilapidated lean-to, an old, barely functional shelter used by hunters or occasional hikers. It was nothing more than a few logs covered with a tarp, but at that moment it felt like a palace. I crawled inside, shedding my heavy, waterlogged pack and collapsing onto the damp earth. I was exhausted physically and mentally. My head still throbbed, a dull ache that seemed to resonate with the phantom hum of the stone. I rummaged in my pack for an energy bar, chewing it slowly, mechanically, trying to regain some strength. My radio was still dead, no signal, just static. I tried calling base again, just in case, but there was nothing. Henderson was right, the storm had rolled in. Or was it the stone's interference still affecting the signal? I didn't know. I didn't want to think about it. I pulled out my emergency blanket, a thin, metallic sheet, and wrapped myself in it, trying to conserve body heat. The cold seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the chill of existential dread that had settled in my soul. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the roar of the storm, the dripping of rain, the creak of ancient trees. My eyes were wide open, staring into the blackness, seeing not the crude roof of the lean-to, but the swirling nebulae, the impossible cities, the vast, silent emptiness of space. I was no longer just a park ranger. I was a witness, a secret keeper, and I had no idea what to do next. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, the purple light pulsed behind my eyelids and the hum vibrated in my ears. The world had changed, and I had changed with it. I decided then that I would go back. Once the storm passed, once I'd rested, I would find that stream again. I would find that stone. I had to. I couldn't leave it there, a gaping wound in reality, unexamined, unexplained. and I couldn't leave it there for someone else to stumble upon, someone less prepared, less aware. It was an insane decision. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But the curiosity, the overwhelming, dangerous curiosity, had returned. It was no longer just about understanding, it was about protecting. Protecting the forest, yes, but perhaps also protecting humanity from something it wasn't ready for. I would hike back to the station, resupply, gather myself, and then I would return. I had to. The knowledge was a weight, a responsibility. The thought of going back filled me with a sickening blend of terror and grim determination. I was stepping into the unknown, a world beyond maps and scientific journals. A world of backward-flowing streams and pulsating, cosmic stones. A world where the laws of nature bent and broke, and I was the only one who knew it existed. The storm raged outside, mirroring the tempest within me. I curled tighter into my emergency blanket, waiting for dawn, waiting for the rain to cease, waiting for the strength to begin my impossible journey back to the impossible. This was just the beginning, I knew it, and a cold, creeping certainty told me that I would never truly be the same again. The first light of dawn was a pale, bruised gray, struggling to penetrate the thick canopy overhead. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound silence punctuated only by the drip of water from leaves and the distant, mournful rush of a swollen creek. I pushed myself up from the damp earth of the lean-to, every muscle screaming in protest. My body was stiff, cold, and utterly exhausted, but my mind, surprisingly, felt sharper than it had in hours. The phantom hum was still there, a low thrum deep in my skull, but it had receded, becoming a bearable echo rather than an intrusive vibration. I shivered, pulling the emergency blanket tighter around me before slowly, painfully standing. The metallic taste lingered in my mouth, a constant reminder. Looking out from the crude shelter, the forest was a different place. The ground was churned into mud, small rivulets still snaking their way downhill. Branches heavy with water hung low, and in places smaller trees had been toppled, their roots clawing at the sky like desperate hands. It was a mess, but a familiar mess, a natural mess, not the impossible, reality-bending mess I'd stumbled upon yesterday. I rummaged in my pack for a water bottle and the last of my energy bars. The water was lukewarm, the bar tasteless, but I forced them down, knowing I needed every ounce of strength. My radio was still stubbornly dead. I tried it again, just a flicker of hope, but it remained silent, a useless piece of plastic and metal. Henderson wouldn't be able to reach me, and I wouldn't be able to call him. I was on my own for the hike back to the station. I pulled out my map and compass. The map, despite my earlier X marking the impossible stream, felt like a comforting anchor to the world I understood. I traced a finger along the contours, trying to re-establish my bearings. The storm, combined with my panicked flight, had pushed me further north than I intended. I was still deep in the less traveled section, and Henderson's warning about the restricted sector still gnawed at me. Was the stone in that sector? Or was the sector itself just a vague term for uncharted, possibly unstable territory? It didn't matter now. My immediate goal was survival, then a return to civilization. Then, and only then, would I execute my insane plan. I packed up my meager camp, shoulders aching with the effort. My boots, still waterlogged, felt heavy as I stepped out into the sodden forest. The air was cool and crisp, washed clean by the rain, but carried the damp, earthy smell of wet soil and decaying leaves. The sun, finally breaking through the clouds, cast long, watery shafts of light through the canopy, illuminating millions of shimmering raindrops. The hike back was grueling. Every step was a careful calculation to avoid slipping in the mud or tripping over obscured roots. The forest, though returning to its familiar sounds, still held a new, unnerving quality for me. The chirping of birds seemed louder, almost frantic, as if trying to reassert normal life. The rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth made me jump. My nerves were shot. I found myself constantly checking over my shoulder, half expecting to see a faint purple glow through the trees or to hear the distant, impossible gurgle of water flowing uphill. My mind replayed the visions, the swirling nebulae, the impossible cities, the vast emptiness. Each replay sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. It was like a film reel stuck in my head, showing snippets of a reality I was never meant to witness. I pushed those thoughts down deep, trying to focus on the familiar, the scent of pine, the texture of bark, the sound of my own ragged breathing. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on navigating the downed branches and slippery slopes. It was a physical exertion that kept my frantic mind from fully unraveling. Around midday, after what felt like an endless march, I finally stumbled upon a familiar game trail, one that would eventually lead me back to a secondary ranger access road. The relief was immense, a physical lightening in my chest. The humming in my head seemed to recede a little further, replaced by the mundane sounds of the forest. The metallic taste in my mouth, however, remained. It took me another 3 hours to reach the access road, and by then the fatigue was overwhelming. I knew the road would eventually lead to the main highway, then to the station. But walking it would take another few hours. I leaned against a mile marker, pulling out my phone. Miraculously, a single bar of service flickered to life. I called Henderson. Henderson, this is Miller. I'm on the old logging road about 5 miles north of the main highway turnoff. I'm okay. My voice was rough, but I tried to keep it steady. There was a moment of static, then Henderson's voice, sharp with relief and annoyance. Miller, good God, man, where have you been? Your radio went dead, and your last coordinates were way out in the restricted zone. We were about to send out a search party. I got disoriented in the storm, Henderson, lost my way. My radio packed it in. I sheltered in an old lean-to overnight, just hiking out now. I kept it vague, sticking to the truth of the storm and my lost status, omitting the part about the stone and my earlier conversation with him. Disoriented, Miller, you know these woods better than anyone, and the storm didn't roll in until well after your last check-in. What happened? Your pings were erratic even before the storm. You sure you're all right? You sound rough. I'm fine, Henderson, just tired. Long night. I'll be back at the station in a few hours. I'll give you a full report then. I needed to buy myself time to construct a believable story, time to calm my racing thoughts. All right, Miller, just get back safely and watch yourself. This region has been acting weird lately. Lots of strange readings, atmospheric interference, even before the storm. Henderson's voice was less accusatory now, more genuinely concerned. We'll send a truck to pick you up at the highway turnoff. ETA 20 minutes. Appreciate it, Henderson. See you then. I ended the call, leaning my head against the cool, rough bark of a nearby tree. Strange readings, atmospheric interference, so it wasn't just me. They were picking up something. Did they know it was the stone or just vague anomalies? The truck arrived promptly, a familiar green park service pickup. Dave, a younger ranger, was at the wheel. He gave me a worried look as I climbed in. "Miller, you look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a tired smile. Longest night of my life, Dave. Got caught in that storm, had to shelter in a leaky lean-to. Muddy hike out. He nodded, accepting the easy explanation. "Yeah, it was a nasty one. Henderson was worried sick. Said your radio was cutting out bad. He looked through some old maps for that sector you were in, said it's notoriously tricky, lots of sinkholes and unstable ground. Good thing you made it out." Sinkholes and unstable ground. Another potential piece of the puzzle, or just a convenient cover story for Park Service brass? I didn't know. My mind was too weary to parse it all. I just nodded, grateful for the silence as Dave drove us back towards the station. The ranger station, a familiar wooden building nestled amongst towering pines, felt like a beacon of sanity. The smell of coffee, the hum of computers, the sound of colleagues chatting, it was a sensory balm to my frayed nerves. I walked in, trying to project an air of tired normalcy. Henderson was waiting for me, leaning against his desk, arms crossed. He was a gruff man, thick-set and grizzled, but with a sharp mind. He took one look at my mud-caked uniform, my haunted eyes, and the tremor in my hands that I tried to conceal. "Miller, come into my office." His voice was low, serious. I followed him into his small, cluttered office, the door closing with a soft click behind us. He gestured to the worn visitor's chair. I sank into it, grateful for the support. "All right, Miller, what really happened out there?" He didn't mince words. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through the jumble of truth and necessary lies. I was checking the eastern boundary markers, like I said. Got a bit off trail due to that landslide near Granite Ridge. I was trying to cut across a gully to save time. That's when I found a small stream. It wasn't on my map. Henderson leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. And the water was flowing unusually. Against the incline in places, I thought it was an optical illusion or some weird current, but it was definitely flowing uphill. I watched his face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. No outright disbelief yet, just a furrowed brow. Uphill, he raised an eyebrow, like defying gravity. I hesitated, not exactly defying it, more like gently circumventing it, like there was an unseen force pushing it. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. I knew this was the hardest part to sell. "And you followed this unusual stream." "I did. It was unprecedented, Henderson. I thought it might be a new geological feature, something that needed to be mapped. It led me deeper into the old growth, into that sector you mentioned. That's when my radio started acting up, then died." "And the source," Henderson pressed, his gaze unwavering. This was the critical juncture. I couldn't tell him about the floating stone, the purple light, the cosmic visions. Not yet, maybe never. "The source was peculiar," I said, choosing my words carefully. It was a small, perfectly circular pool. The water seemed to emanate from the ground there, almost bubbling up. And there was a lot of atmospheric interference, a strong static charge in the air, a hum. That's why my radio went dead. I omitted the stone, but kept the effects it had caused. Henderson leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. He rubbed his chin, looking at a spot on the wall behind me. Atmospheric interference, a hum, a static charge that matches what we were picking up on our end, Miller. Strong energy spikes far beyond anything natural, and not just your grid. It was affecting a wider area, stretching further south than we usually see. My heart hammered, so they knew more than I thought. It felt like a powerful energy source, Henderson, nothing I've ever encountered. The air tasted like ozone. He nodded slowly. I believe you, Miller, not about the uphill stream necessarily, that's a bit much, but about the energy. We've had a few reports over the years about strange anomalies in that particular sector. Old-timers mostly dismissed as folklore or the effects of high altitude. But the data doesn't lie. What you described matches some of the interference patterns we picked up from a distance. So you're saying you knew about something out there? I asked, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. Not new, Miller, suspected. Our sensors are limited. This is a vast forest, but yes, there have been indications. We tried to map it more thoroughly a few years back, but our equipment kept failing. We classified it as a geologically unstable zone, restricted access to discourage hikers and keep park service personnel from wandering too far in. Easier than trying to explain something we don't understand. He sighed, running a hand over his face. You found something real, didn't you? Not just a trick of the light. Yes, Henderson, something very real. I felt a sliver of relief. He wasn't dismissing me outright, not entirely. He was willing to consider it. Did you get close to this source? He asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. I thought about the pulling sensation, the warm, viscous water, the visions. I got to the edge of the pool, felt the static. It was intense. That's when the storm hit and I decided to get out. Couldn't get a bearing with the radio out and the compass acting erratic. That last part was a lie. My compass worked fine, but it sounded plausible. Henderson studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, Miller, I'll make a note of your report. We'll get a specialized team out there to investigate, maybe with better equipment. No need for you to go back and right away. You're due for some R&R after this anyway. Get yourself cleaned up, grab some food, and then take a few days off. You've earned it. A specialized team. Henderson thought a geological survey team could handle this. He had no idea, but it bought me time. Time to prepare, time to return alone. Thanks, Henderson. I appreciate it. I think I'll take you up on that RR. I stood up, feeling a fresh wave of exhaustion now that the immediate crisis was over. And Miller, he called as I reached the door. I turned. Don't go wandering back into that sector on your own. It's restricted for a reason. And from what you're describing, it sounds like something serious. It might not be safe. Understood, Henderson. I lied, knowing full well I intended to do exactly that. I walked out of his office through the main area of the station. A few colleagues nodded, some gave me sympathetic smiles. None of them suspected the monumental secret I now carried. I felt a profound sense of isolation, burdened by a truth too enormous to share. My first stop was the showers. The hot water felt like a revelation, washing away the mud and the chill, but it couldn't wash away the lingering dread. I stared at my reflection in the steamed mirror, my eyes wide, pupils slightly dilated. I looked older, haggard. The man staring back was no longer just Ranger Miller. He was someone else, someone marked by the impossible. After a quick, unsatisfying meal in the staff mess, my appetite was gone, replaced by a churning in my stomach. I retreated to my small, Spartan living quarters attached to the station. I pulled out my own, more extensive collection of maps, some dating back decades, and spread them across my desk. I found the section Henderson had vaguely called the restricted zone. On older maps, it was simply marked unsurveyed. On some, faint lines indicated treacherous terrain, old mining claims, or unstable rock formations. There was no specific reason for restriction, just a general warning. I pinpointed my last known location before I found the stream. Then, using my memory, I traced the stream's impossible path uphill through the old growth to the rough location of the pool. It was deeper in than I thought, nestled in a fold of the mountains where three old, almost forgotten fault lines converged. Unstable ground indeed. But was it unstable because of the stone, or was the stone drawn to the instability? My mind raced. I needed gear. Not just standard patrol gear, but something more. I needed a better radio, one with a stronger signal. I needed a GPS unit with more detailed topographical data. Maybe a camera, though I doubted anything could capture the pulsing purple light. I needed scientific instruments. A Geiger counter, an EMF reader, things I didn't own, things the station might have, but I couldn't openly request without raising suspicion. I spent the rest of the day in a blur of forced normality. I tidied my gear, filed a partial report, omitting anything too fantastical, sticking to the lost in storm, found strange energy anomaly narrative. Henderson seemed satisfied, albeit still concerned. He reiterated that the geological team would be deployed in a few days, giving me a perfect window. The night was restless, sleep was elusive. Every time I closed my eyes, the purple light pulsed. The hum, though faint, seemed woven into the silence of my room. I kept replaying my decision to go back. Was it madness, a suicidal urge, or a desperate need for answers, a primal drive to confront the unknown? I kept coming back to the phrase, protecting humanity from something it wasn't ready for. It felt like a heavy cloak, a burden I hadn't asked for but couldn't shed. I also considered the alternative, abandoning the stone, letting Henderson's geological team stumble upon it unprepared. What if they touched it? What if they saw the vision? What if they went mad? Or worse, what if they somehow triggered something catastrophic? My ranger training instilled a deep sense of responsibility for the wilderness, and now that sense extended to this impossible anomaly within it. I had seen it, I had touched it. It was my burden. By mornings, my resolve was hardened. I would go back, but not blindly. I would prepare. I needed to gather specific supplies. My first priority was to replace my lost radio and get a reliable GPS unit. I went to the supply room, explaining to the quartermaster that my old equipment had been damaged in the storm. He was a stickler for protocol, but Henderson's take care of Miller directive seemed to have smoothed the way. I signed out a new Advanced Park Service GPS model and a heavy-duty, long-range radio, justifying it by saying I wanted to be extra cautious after my recent ordeal. Next, I needed to figure out how to detect the energy without arousing suspicion. A Geiger counter was out, too specific, too alien for a normal patrol, but an EMF reader. Park rangers often carried basic EMF readers to check for down power lines or unusual electrical activity near remote cabins. I managed to sign one out, citing potential unusual electrical activity in the restricted sector. That much was true. I also needed specialized mapping tools. I quietly gathered older, more detailed topographical maps of the Gray Peaks, including some that predated the restricted sector designation. I wanted to see every contour, every ancient landmark, every subtle change in elevation. I pored over them, cross-referencing with satellite imagery available on the station's computer, looking for anything that might hint at the stone's presence or perhaps other similar anomalies. There was nothing, only vast, untouched forest. My pack needed an overhaul. I meticulously packed emergency rations, a first aid kit, extra layers of clothing, a durable tarp, rope, and a high-powered flashlight. I even included a set of small, watertight containers. What for, I wasn't sure. To collect water samples from the stream, soil samples from around the stone. The scientific part of my brain, though overwhelmed, was still trying to function. I spent the next 2 days in a state of quiet agitation, feigning relaxation but internally buzzing with preparation. Henderson sent me home early each day, urging me to get some rest. I used the extra time to plan my route, analyzing the terrain, identifying potential hazards, and marking emergency rendezvous points. I decided to approach from a different direction this time, a less direct but potentially safer route that avoided the immediate aftermath of the storm's damage and minimized the chance of encountering anyone else. I knew I couldn't tell anyone. My colleagues would think I was crazy. The Park Service bureaucracy would bury it, contain it, or worse, try to exploit it. The stone and its implications were too vast, too dangerous for human institutions to handle responsibly. It had to be me. On the morning of the third day, Henderson stopped me as I was heading out, ostensibly for a short day hike on a well-known trail. "Miller, you still look a bit green around the gills. Are you sure you shouldn't take another day or two?" he asked, a hint of genuine concern in his voice. "I'm fine, Henderson, just cabin fever, need to stretch my legs. I'll stick to the mapped trails, I promise." My lie tasted bitter. He eyed my pack, which was a little heavier than usual for a day hike, but not suspiciously so. "All right, but keep that radio on and check in every few hours, and for God's sake, stay out of the restricted zone. The survey team is moving in tomorrow. Don't want you getting in their way." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, forcing a smile. "Good luck to them." I nodded, walked out, and headed straight to my truck. Instead of driving towards the popular hiking trails, I turned east, towards the forgotten dirt roads that eventually snaked their way to the far reaches of the gray peaks. The hum in my head was growing steadily stronger with each mile I drove in that direction, a subtle thrum that vibrated through the steering wheel and up my arms. The familiar dread began to settle in my stomach, coiling tighter with every passing minute. It was the same fear I'd felt before, but now mingled with a grim determination, a sense of purpose that transcended mere curiosity. I was no longer just running from something, I was running towards it. I parked my truck hidden off an old, overgrown logging road, deep enough that it wouldn't be easily spotted by other rangers or hikers. The air was cool and still, the sunlight filtering through the dense canopy in dappled patterns on the forest floor. A profound silence hung in the air, similar to the one I'd experienced near the stream, but not as absolute. Here there were still the faint sounds of distant birds, the rustle of leaves in the barely there breeze. But it was a silence that felt like a prelude, a held breath before something monumental. I checked my gear one last time, new radio on my shoulder strap, GPS unit clipped to my belt, EMF reader tucked into an accessible pocket. My heavy pack felt like a physical representation of the burden I carried. I took a deep breath, the metallic taste already returning to my mouth. This time I wasn't panicked, not frantic. I was terrified, yes, but it was a cold, controlled terror sharpened by resolve. I was going back. I had to. The The stone was waiting, and I had a feeling it held more than just cosmic visions. It held answers and perhaps even more questions. This wasn't just a patrol anymore, it was a mission, and I was completely, terrifyingly alone. I began my hike, pushing through the undergrowth, following the faint deer trails I'd identified on my maps. I moved slowly, deliberately, conserving energy, my senses alert. Every snapped twig, every rustle was magnified. The forest pressed in, ancient and watchful. The hum in my head was now a constant, low thrum like a distant, powerful engine. I felt its resonance in my chest, a faint vibration that mirrored the stone's pulse. My new GPS unit, usually rock solid, was already showing erratic readings. My position jumped a few yards here, a few yards there, flickering back and forth. The Park Service satellite imagery, which should have been accurate within a few feet, was blurring in this particular sector, showing patches of distortion, like static on an old television screen. Henderson's atmospheric interference was far more pervasive and powerful than he realized. I activated the EMF reader. The needle immediately twitched, then slowly climbed, settling on a low but consistent reading. It was definitely picking up something. Electrical activity, energy that shouldn't be here. It was a physical manifestation of the anomaly, a cold comfort in its scientific confirmation. As I pushed deeper into the old growth, the trees began to change again. Taller, darker, their branches interwoven so tightly overhead that the sunlight struggled to penetrate. The undergrowth thinned, replaced by a carpet of dark, damp moss. The silence grew heavier, the distant bird calls fading into nothingness. This was the same oppressive quiet I remembered. The air grew colder, the metallic taste in my mouth more pronounced. The terrain became steeper, more rugged. I navigated carefully, my ranger training kicking in, allowing me to focus on the physical challenge rather than the creeping dread. I knew I was getting close. The hum intensified, a deep bass note that vibrated through my bones, making my teeth ache. The EMF reader's needle climbed steadily higher, now firmly in the unusual range. Then through the gloom of the ancient trees I saw it, a faint shimmer like heat haze in the distance, and beneath it a subtle, ethereal glow, purple. My breath caught in my throat. It was real, all of it. The impossible stream, the floating stone, the visions, the dread that had been a dull ache in my chest for days flared into a sharp, icy pain. I wanted to turn, to run, to flee this unnatural place and never look back, but I couldn't. The pull was too strong, the questions too insistent. I pushed forward, my legs heavy, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm. The shimmer resolved itself into the clearing, the small pool, and in its center, the obsidian black stone, pulsing with its deep, otherworldly purple light. It was exactly as I remembered, horrifyingly beautiful, utterly alien. The stream, narrow and clear, still flowed uphill from the pool's edge, defying every law of nature I knew. Leaves, red and gold, drifted slowly, patiently against the current, making their impossible journey upstream. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, hidden by a cluster of ancient hemlocks, observing. The air around the stone thrummed with a palpable energy. The static charge made the hairs on my arms stand on end, and my skin tingled. The hum was a low, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate the very ground beneath my feet. My gaze fell upon the stone, mesmerized by its slow, rhythmic pulse. The purple light intensified and receded, casting strange, shifting shadows on the dark water of the pool. It felt like a living thing, ancient and vast, slumbering yet awake. This time I wouldn't rush. This time I wouldn't touch it impulsively. I had come prepared, or at least as prepared as a human could be for such an encounter. I pulled out my new radio, clicked it on. The static was immense, a deafening hiss that drowned out all other sound. The display showed no signal, just a scramble of meaningless characters. Useless. Next, the GPS. The screen flickered wildly, my coordinates jumping hundreds of yards in an instant, then snapping back, then flickering away again. The map on the display was a distorted mess, lines wavering, contours blurring. The stone was actively disrupting everything, bending the very fabric of reality around it. Finally, the EMF reader. The needle immediately spiked, slamming against the far right of the dial, well past its maximum reading. It wasn't just unusual, it was off the charts, an explosion of unknown energy. This was no geological anomaly. This was something else entirely. Something beyond science, beyond understanding. And I was standing alone before it, a single human being armed with a few instruments and a desperate need to know. I needed to approach cautiously. What if touching the water again triggered the visions? What if it did something worse? I knelt slowly, carefully, a few yards back from the pool's edge. I pulled out my camera, a small digital one. I focused it on the stone, trying to capture its impossible glow. I snapped several pictures, but the resulting images on the display were blurred, washed out by the purple light, or filled with strange streaks of static. It refused to be captured. I sat back on my heels, taking a moment to absorb the utter impossibility of it all. What was my next move? I couldn't just stare at it. I had to gather data, had to learn something. I thought about the water samples. I rummaged in my pack for one of the small, watertight containers. I then found a long, sturdy stick broken off from a fallen branch. Using my multi-tool, I fashioned a small cup-like scoop from a piece of discarded plastic, tying it securely to the end of the stick. This way, I could reach the water without getting too close, without directly touching it. My hands trembled as I extended the stick slowly towards the pool. The metallic taste in my mouth was overwhelming now, and the hum vibrated through my entire body, a physical pressure that made my head throb. I focused on the task, trying to push away the fear. The stick, with its makeshift scoop, reached the edge of the water. As it dipped in, the same faint, iridescent ripple spread from the stone, reaching out to meet the intrusion. The water itself seemed to stir, a gentle, almost welcoming movement. I plunged the scoop into the water, feeling the strange, silken viscosity I remembered. I pulled it back carefully, the small container half filled with the impossibly clear, shimmering liquid. I quickly capped the container, securing it safely in an inner pocket of my pack. One sample. What would it tell me? Probably nothing without proper lab equipment. But it was a start. It was an act, a concrete step against the overwhelming unknown. I repeated the process, collecting a second sample from the flowing stream further away from the stone. If the water was truly being generated by the stone, would there be a difference? Would its properties change as it moved away from the source? More questions, more unknowns. As I worked, something shifted in the air. The hum intensified, not gradually, but with a sudden, alarming surge. The purple light from the stone brightened, becoming almost painfully vivid. The air around it shimmered violently, like heat rising from asphalt on a blistering summer day, even though the air was cold. My heart leaped into my throat. The stone was reacting. to me, to my presence, to my attempts to study it. A deep, resonant thrumming began, not just a hum, but a sound that seemed to originate from deep within the earth itself, vibrating up through my boots and into my bones. The ground began to tremble, a low, continuous tremor that intensified with each passing second. This wasn't a natural earthquake. This was focused, localized, emanating directly from the stone. The water in the pool began to churn violently, swirling faster, pulling at the surface as if trying to suck the stone down, or perhaps as if the stone was pulling at the water. The stream flowing uphill twisted and bucked, tiny geysers of water erupting from its surface. A panic flared raw and primal. This was wrong. I had provoked it. Or maybe it was just responding to my presence, my very existence in this sacred, forbidden place. I scrambled backward, away from the pool, away from the terrifying escalation of energy. The EMF reader, still clipped to my belt, let out a piercing shriek, its internal components seemingly overloaded. Its needle thrashed wildly, then snapped, breaking the device. The ground shuddered again, more violently this time. A deep crack appeared in the earth near the edge of the pool, widening rapidly. Ancient trees around the clearing groaned, their branches swaying as if in distress. The stone pulsed with a blinding, almost white-purple light, the intensity of which was unbearable. The hum was now a deafening roar, vibrating through my skull, threatening to burst my eardrums. My teeth ached, my head spun, and I felt a crushing pressure, as if the air itself was trying to flatten me. I closed my eyes, shielding them with my arm, but the light still burned through my eyelids, leaving purple afterimages. I stumbled, desperate to get away, to escape this raw display of impossible power. Then from the stone, a pulse of energy erupted, not outwardly, but vertically, shooting a blinding column of pure, white-purple light directly up into the dense canopy. It tore through the interwoven branches as if they were mist, piercing the sky itself. A sound like ripping silk tore through the air, followed by a resonant crack that echoed through the entire forest. The light column pulsed once more, then began to recede, drawing back into the stone. As the light faded, the hum began to diminish, the ground tremors lessened, and the churning water slowly subsided. The silence that followed was immense, heavy, and profound. I lay on the forest floor, gasping for breath, my body aching, my ears ringing with residual noise. My vision slowly cleared, and I cautiously opened my eyes. The stone still hovered, pulsing with its familiar, softer purple light. The stream still flowed uphill, calmly now. Everything seemed to have returned to its previous, impossible state. But it hadn't. High above, directly overhead, where the column of light had pierced the canopy, there was a perfect circle of clear, brilliant blue sky. No branches, no leaves, just an impossibly perfect, empty hole through the dense forest roof. And through that hole, for a split second, I saw something. It wasn't a cloud, it wasn't the sun. It was a faint, swirling vortex of colors, like a distant nebula, shimmering and shifting, before the surrounding leaves and branches seemed to slowly, almost imperceptibly, begin to creep back in, knitting themselves together as if nothing had ever happened. My jaw dropped. The stone hadn't just emitted energy, it had opened a window. To where? To the same cosmic spaces I had glimpsed in the water. This was far beyond anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just an anomaly, it was a gateway, and I had just witnessed it open and close. The terror was replaced by a cold, unsettling certainty. I was no longer just a witness. I was a participant, and I was in much deeper than I could ever have conceived. I had to get back, not to the station, not to civilization, not yet. I had to get back here. I had to understand what I had just seen. The stone was not just a source of impossible energy and backward flowing water. It was a key to something far greater, far more terrifying than a mere anomaly. A key to another reality. My mind reeled. I lay there, splayed on the damp forest floor, gasping for air, the world spinning around me. The ringing in my ears slowly subsided, replaced by the deafening thrum of my own heart in my chest. I pushed myself up slowly, cautiously, my eyes fixed on the stone. It pulsed with its gentle, hypnotic purple light, serene, as if it hadn't just torn a hole in the fabric of reality. The stream flowed calmly uphill. The silence was absolute, save for the drip of water from leaves and the rustle of my own shaking breath. My gaze drifted upwards to the perfect, impossibly circular hole in the canopy directly above the stone. No branches, no leaves, just a clean, startling circle of blue sky. But as I watched, the edges of the circle began to blur. Like time-lapse photography, the surrounding branches and leaves seemed to unfurl, to stretch, to slowly, almost imperceptibly, knit themselves back together. It was as if the forest itself was trying to heal the wound, to deny the impossible event that had just occurred. In minutes, the hole was gone, replaced by the dense, interwoven canopy, indistinguishable from the surrounding forest. A cold, creeping dread replaced the initial shock. The stone hadn't just created an energy burst, it had opened a portal, a gateway, and it had closed it. My initial theory of protecting humanity now felt laughably naive. I wasn't just observing an anomaly, I was witnessing something that could rewrite existence. The visions I'd seen in the water, the nebulae, the impossible cities, were not just images from a distant past or future. They were glimpses of other places. Places accessed by this stone. I had to get out, not to regroup, not to plan another return, but to escape. The impulse was overwhelming. Every instinct screamed at me to flee this place, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that pulsing, terrifying artifact. This was no longer about scientific curiosity or ranger duty. This was about survival. I scrambled to my feet, my legs wobbly, my body still trembling. My pack felt heavy, a useless burden of human tools in the face of cosmic power. The broken EMF reader dangled uselessly from my belt, a symbol of my inadequacy. I took one last, terrified look at the stone, its purple light now seeming to mock my futile attempts at understanding, and then I turned and ran. I ran blindly, crashing through the undergrowth, tripping over roots, my lungs burning, the metallic taste in my mouth acrid and overwhelming. The silence of the forest, once a prelude, now felt like a predator stalking me. Every rustle was a pursuit, every shadow a lurking threat. I didn't care about my direction, only about getting away, putting miles between myself and that impossible gateway. I ran until my legs gave out, until I collapsed, gasping for air, against the rough bark of a towering pine. The hum was still there, a phantom vibration in my bones, a terrifying echo of the power I had witnessed. My mind raced, trying to process, to rationalize, to find any anchor in the reality I once knew. But there was none. My reality had been irrevocably shattered. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, slowly regaining control of my breathing, trying to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, mimicking the stone's terrifying glow. I knew I couldn't stay here, exposed in the darkening forest. I needed shelter, warmth, and most importantly, time to think. I forced myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My new radio, though useless for communication, was still clipped to my shoulder strap. My GPS, still showing erratic readings, was equally unhelpful. I was lost, truly lost, not just physically, but existentially. I pulled out my compass. It still pointed north, a reassuring constant in a world turned upside down. Southeast. That was the direction back to the main trail, the way Henderson had told me to go. I clutched the compass like a talisman, a connection to the rational world. I walked, driven by the instinct for survival, my mind a chaotic swirl of images. Swirling nebulae, impossible cities, the blinding column of light, the hole in the sky. I wasn't thinking about returning to the station or reporting anything. That felt trivial, absurd in the face of what I now knew. As night fell, the air grew colder and a thin mist began to rise from the damp forest floor. The trees morphed into eerie silhouettes, their ancient forms whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. I was acutely aware of my aloneness, a profound, crushing solitude. The wilderness, once my sanctuary, now felt alien, imbued with a terrible, hidden power. After hours of stumbling through the encroaching darkness, guided only by the faint glimmer of my flashlight, I stumbled upon a small, overhanging rock formation, a natural alcove that offered some protection from the elements. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I crawled in, shedding my heavy pack with a groan of relief. I pulled out my emergency blanket, wrapping myself tightly in its metallic embrace. The cold gnawed at me, but it was the cold in my soul that truly chilled me. I forced down an energy bar, its taste like ash in my mouth, and sipped lukewarm water from my bottle. My thoughts were a jumbled mess, fragmented and terrifying. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the purple light pulsed behind my eyelids and the roar of the gateway ripped through my mind. I was a witness to something no human was meant to see, a custodian of a secret that could break the world. The phrase "key to another reality" echoed in my head, a terrifying mantra. I was no longer just Ranger Miller. I was something else, something irrevocably changed. I had crossed a threshold, stepped beyond the known, and now there was no going back. The stone had marked me, not physically, but deep within my consciousness. As the first faint streaks of dawn appeared through the mist, painting the forest in hues of gray and silver, my frantic thoughts began to coalesce to form a grim, terrifying purpose. I had to understand this, not for science, not for the Park Service, but for myself, for humanity. If the stone was a key, what did it unlock, and what would happen if the wrong people found it? I had to return, not now, not immediately. I needed to properly prepare. I needed to research, to understand what this could be, but I couldn't go back to the station. Henderson would send his geological team, and they would find the stone. They would blunder into it, unprepared, untrained for what they might unleash. No, I couldn't let them find it. I had to get to it first. I had to secure it somehow, protect it from the world, and protect the world from it. It was an insane, impossible task, but it had become my burden, my sole purpose. I packed up my meager camp, the exhaustion a heavy cloak. I would hike out, but not to the ranger station. I needed to disappear, to gather resources, to delve into knowledge far beyond my training. My thoughts turned to Dr. Eris Thorne. He was an eccentric, reclusive ethnobotanist and amateur archaeologist I'd met years ago during a research project in the Grey Peaks. He was a brilliant mind, often dismissed as a conspiracy theorist by mainstream academia, but he had an encyclopedic knowledge of ancient cultures, folklore, and obscure scientific theories. He was the kind of man who would believe me. Or at least, he was the kind of man who wouldn't immediately dismiss me as insane. He lived off-grid, far from any official oversight, in a cabin somewhere on the fringes of the Kaskaskia National Forest, hundreds of miles to the east. Getting to him would be a challenge, but he was my only hope. I checked my map. The main highway was miles away. From there, I could hitchhike, take buses, anything to get out of the Grey Peaks and away from any official scrutiny. I would be going AWOL, leaving my life behind, but my old life was gone anyway. I began the arduous trek out of the forest, no longer running but walking with a grim, determined pace. My mind was consumed with a dizzying array of questions. What were the visions? What kind of energy did the stone emit? How did it open a gateway? And what was on the other side? The journey was a blur of aching muscles, pounding headaches, and the constant phantom hum of the stone. I hiked for hours until I finally reached the periphery of the forest, where the dense canopy gave way to more open, familiar terrain. I avoided any known trails or access roads, keeping to the deeper woods, eventually stumbling onto a dirt track that led away from the national park boundaries. It was late afternoon by the time I finally reached a small, forgotten gas station and general store on the edge of a lonely state highway. It was a ramshackle place, probably untouched for decades, with a single rusty pump and a porch stacked high with dusty farming equipment. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open, stepping into the dim, cluttered interior. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and something vaguely chemical. A stout elderly woman with a severe bun and spectacles perched on her nose looked up from behind a counter piled high with forgotten trinkets. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, took in my disheveled appearance, my mud-caked uniform, and my haunted expression. "Well, bless your heart, young man, you look like you just wrestled a bear and lost, or maybe got caught in last night's storm. Rangers usually don't look quite so feral." Her voice was raspy, but not unkind. "Something like that," I managed, my voice hoarse from disuse. "Do you have a phone I could use? My radio and cell are dead." She gestured with a gnarled hand to an ancient rotary phone on the wall. "Help yourself. Long-distance calls are a quarter. Don't get many of those anymore." I fumbled in my pack for some change, my hands still shaking. I dialed Thorne's old landline number from memory. It rang several times, and for a terrifying moment, I thought it might be disconnected, that my last hope was gone. Then, a gruff, familiar voice answered. "Thorne here, you've reached the last outpost of sanity. State your business, or prepare for a philosophical debate you cannot win." Relief, sharp and overwhelming, flooded through me. Thorn, it's Miller, Ranger Miller from the Gray Peaks. There was a pause on the other end, then a distinct shift in his tone. Miller, good heavens, it's been years. What in the blazes has gotten you to call this old hermit? And you sound different, not your usual stoic ranger self. I found something, Thorn, something impossible. It's in the Gray Peaks. It's beyond anything you could imagine. It's a stone. It floats. It pulses. It reverses gravity. And it opened a gateway. The words tumbled out raw and unfiltered. Another pause, longer this time. I braced myself for the skepticism, the ridicule, the polite dismissal. But Thorn's voice, when it came, was laced with a strange, almost manic excitement. A gateway, you say, to where, Miller? To the ethers, the liminal spaces, the realms beyond the veil. Tell me everything. Where are you? I'll come get you. No, wait, that'll draw attention. You need to come to me. Can you make it to Fairhaven? There's a bus that runs there twice a week. I can meet you. Fairhaven? Yes, I can make it. Hope, a fragile, terrifying thing, began to bloom in my chest. I need to disappear, Thorn. I'm effectively AWOL. I can't go back to the station. They're sending a team in. A team? Oh, excellent. More witnesses. No, wait, if it's what I suspect, a team would be problematic. Catastrophic, even. Miller, you must understand what you describe aligns with the theories. Ancient myths, whispers of other worlds. The veil between realities is thin in places, especially where specific telluric currents converge. I always suspected the Gray Peaks held such a node. Hurry, Miller, get to Fairhaven. I'll make arrangements for you to get to my cabin from there, and don't speak of this to anyone, not a soul. Understood, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Thank you, Thorn, thank you. I hung up the phone, feeling a profound sense of relief, but also an even greater weight of responsibility. Thorn believed me. That was a start. But his words, telluric currents, liminal spaces, realms beyond the veil, only deepen the mystery, adding layers of arcane knowledge to the scientific impossibility. I bought a cheap, dark hoodie and a pair of worn jeans from the general store, trading my ranger uniform for anonymity. The old woman at the counter eyed me suspiciously but said nothing, simply bagging my purchases with a shrug. I felt like a criminal, abandoning my post, going against everything I'd sworn to uphold. But my oath was to protect, and that now extended to a threat far greater than any forest fire or poaching ring. I spent the next 2 days hitchhiking and taking a series of local buses, a surreal blur of anonymous faces, roadside diners, and cheap motels. I slept fitfully, haunted by the pulsing light and the roar of the gateway. The metallic taste in my mouth was a constant companion, and the faint hum seemed to resonate from deep within my own skull. I avoided contact, spoke to no one, keeping my head down, a ghost slipping through the mundane world. Fairhaven was a sleepy, forgotten town nestled in a valley, surrounded by dense forest. Thorn was waiting for me at the bus stop, a tall, gaunt man with a wild shock of white hair and a perpetually excited glint in his piercing blue eyes. He wore a tweed jacket that looked a few sizes too big and carried a battered leather satchel. Miller, my dear boy, you look dreadful but alive. That's the important thing. He clapped me on the shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. Come, my ride is waiting. We have much to discuss. His ride was an ancient, beat-up pickup truck, its bed filled with obscure scientific equipment, dusty books, and what looked like a collection of meteorites. We drove for what felt like hours deeper and deeper into the Kaskaskia National Forest, along narrow, winding dirt roads. Thorne talked incessantly, a torrent of theories, anecdotes, and obscure historical facts. He spoke of ley lines, ancient earth energies, forgotten civilizations that allegedly tapped into cosmic power, and the mythical gateways of Eld. Your description, Miller, of a pulsating obsidian stone reversing water flow, emitting energy, and then opening a temporary portal, it's uncannily similar to certain accounts in esoteric texts. The heart of Etha, some called it, a nexus point, a place where the veil thins. He gestured wildly with one hand, narrowly avoiding a deer. You believe me then? I asked, almost needing to hear it again. Believe you, my dear boy, I've been waiting for someone to find something like this for decades. Mainstream science is so utterly blind, so constrained by its own paradigms. But the ancients knew. They spoke of these places, these nodes where the fabric of reality is permeable. He gave me a wild grin. This is monumental, Miller, monumental. His excitement, though bordering on madness, was strangely comforting. It was a stark contrast to the sterile disbelief I would have faced at the park service. Finally, we arrived at his cabin, a rustic, sprawling structure built into the side of a hill, almost entirely camouflaged by the surrounding trees. It was a chaotic wonderland of books, maps, strange artifacts, and scientific equipment. The air hummed with an intellectual energy that felt almost palpable. Welcome to the Sanctum Sanctorum, Miller, Thorne announced, sweeping an arm dramatically. Make yourself at home. We have work to do. He led me to a small, cluttered guest room, barely a spare corner carved out amidst towering stacks of books. Get some rest, eat something, then we talk, every detail, every sensation, no matter how impossible it sounds. I slept deeply that night, the first truly restful sleep I'd had in days. The hum was still there, a faint echo, but for the first time it didn't feel entirely menacing. It felt connected. The next morning, after a breakfast of surprisingly good coffee and thick-cut toast, we sat across from each other at a large, scarred wooden table, maps spread between us. Thorne had a notepad and pen, his eyes alight with anticipation. All right, Miller, from the beginning, and spare no detail. The metallic taste, the buzzing in your teeth, the atmospheric pressure, everything. I began to recount my story, starting from the moment I spotted the impossible stream. I described the floating stone, its obsidian surface, the pulsing purple light. I recounted the pull of the water, the strange, viscous texture, and the terrifying cosmic visions. Thorne listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a muttered, fascinating, or a scribbled note. When I described the stone's violent reaction to my sampling, the overloaded EMF reader, the column of light tearing through the canopy, and the glimpse of the swirling vortex, Thorne slammed his hand on the table, making the cups jump. A gateway, just as I suspected. A transient manifestation, yes, but a true opening, and it closed. Remarkable, truly remarkable. This is not merely a conduit of energy, Miller. It's a mechanism. A device, perhaps, for interdimensional travel. His words, though sensational, resonated with the terrifying truth I had witnessed. Interdimensional travel, you mean it goes to other planets, other universes? Perhaps both. The visions you saw, nebulae, distant stars, planets forming, but also geometric patterns, towering structures of light, impossible cities. Those sound like manufactured environments, artificial constructs, not natural phenomena. Other realities, Miller, other domains of existence. The possibilities are staggering. He paused, a rare moment of silence. And the metallic taste, the aching teeth, the hum, I suspect it's a form of resonance. Your body, being in such close proximity to such a powerful, reality-bending nexus, is reacting to the energetic output. Your very cellular structure is vibrating at a frequency it was not meant to process. So it's affecting me, I asked, a shiver running down my spine. Profoundly, I imagine. You are, in a sense, attuned to it now. You have been touched by the liminal. This is why you feel the pull to return. It's not just curiosity, Miller, it's a connection. The thought was unsettling, yet it explained the terrible compulsion I felt. What about the Park Service team? I asked. Henderson said they were going in yesterday. Thorne's face grew serious. That is a grave concern. If they stumble upon it unprepared, they could trigger something catastrophic. Or worse, they might become casualties. Human minds are not built to withstand such a profound violation of natural law without breaking. I have to go back, I stated, the words firm, resolute. I have to get there before them. I have to secure the stone, or at least understand it enough to prevent disaster. And how do you propose to do that, my dear Ranger? Thorne raised an eyebrow. You, a single individual against an unknown cosmic mechanism. It's madness. It's my responsibility, I countered, feeling a fresh surge of the grim determination that had driven me to Thorne's door. I found it. I touched it. I saw what it could do. I can't abandon it. Thorne leaned back, studying me for a long moment, a strange mixture of admiration and concern in his eyes. Very well, madness it may be, but noble madness, and I admit the thought of being so close to such a discovery to finally confirm these ancient theories, it's irresistible. He sighed, but we cannot go blindly. We must prepare. We must arm ourselves, not with weapons, but with knowledge. Over the next few days, Thorne subjected me to a crash course in his esoteric knowledge. He led me through ancient texts, obscure scientific journals, and his own meticulously compiled theories. He spoke of universal constants, quantum entanglement, and the possibility of other dimensions, not as theoretical concepts, but as palpable realities. He explained the concept of telluric currents, invisible rivers of energy flowing beneath the earth, and how certain geological formations, like the convergence of fault lines in the Gray Peaks, could amplify or channel them. The stone, Miller, is likely not just a random object. It's a focal point, a capacitor, perhaps an anchor for these energies. And its obsidian nature, many ancient cultures believed obsidian to be a powerful conduit for spiritual and metaphysical energies. It's a volcanic glass formed from intense heat and pressure, a solidified moment of geological violence. Perhaps it resonates with the very forces that created it, forces that run deep within the planet. He even had a small, custom-built device, a modified EMF reader that he called a resonance detector. It was designed not just to measure electromagnetic fields, but to detect subtle shifts in energy frequencies that, according to his theories, might indicate the thinning of dimensional veils. "This will be our compass, Miller," he said, holding up the strange device. "It won't give you coordinates, but it will tell you when you're nearing the liminal. When the static in your head grows stronger, this will confirm it." We meticulously planned my return trip. We reviewed my old maps, cross-referencing them with Thorne's extensive collection of geological surveys and even some old mining maps he'd acquired. We identified the precise location of the stone based on my description and the convergence of fault lines. "The instability of that sector, as your Henderson mentioned," Thorne mused, tracing a finger across a map, "is not merely geological. It is metaphysical. The Earth itself is more volatile there, more susceptible to being perturbed by such a powerful artifact." Thorne insisted I wouldn't be going alone. "I am too old, too fragile for a trek through that kind of wilderness, Miller, but I have a protege, a brilliant young woman, a former student who shares my unorthodox views. She is a survivalist, a highly trained field researcher, and she knows these forests better than almost anyone. Her name is Dr. Lena Hansen. She will go with you." Lena Hansen arrived at Thorne's cabin a day later. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, a lean, athletic build, and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor. She wore practical hiking gear and carried a pack that looked as well-used as my own. Thorne introduced us, and Lena listened patiently as he rapidly summarized my story, adding his own excited commentary about telluric currents and interdimensional gateways. Her expression remained impassive, but her eyes held a spark of intense curiosity. "So you've seen it, Ranger Miller?" she asked, her voice low and even, devoid of any hint of skepticism. "A stone that defies gravity and opens portals." "Yes, Dr. Hansen, I have." "And you believe we can understand it, perhaps even contain it?" "I believe we have to try." She nodded slowly. "Thorne has told me much about the thinning veil and potential nexus points. I've studied his theories, collected data for him in other remote areas. I've never found anything as definitive as what you describe. This is an unprecedented opportunity." She looked at me, a faint smile touching her lips, "and a monumental risk. Are you prepared for that, Ranger?" "I am," I replied, a sense of shared purpose beginning to solidify. Lena's presence, her calm competence, was incredibly reassuring. I wasn't alone anymore. For 2 more days, we trained, planned, and gathered supplies. Lena had her own specialized gear, advanced mapping software, rugged communication devices that boasted superior signal penetration, though Thorne cautioned they might still struggle near the stone, and a comprehensive medical kit. She even carried a small, portable drone, equipped with an advanced camera and thermal sensors for aerial reconnaissance, something I had only dreamed of having. Thorne insisted on equipping us with protective measures. He gave us each a pendant, crafted from a strange, iridescent crystal. "These are imbued with certain resonant frequencies," he explained with a conspiratorial wink. "They won't stop a direct interdimensional assault, but they might offer a degree of psychic shielding, a vibrational buffer against the stone's more consciousness-altering effects." I took it, skeptical but willing to try anything. Our final briefing was intense. Thorn laid out his strategy: approach cautiously, observe, gather more data, and above all, avoid direct interaction with the stone unless absolutely necessary. The key is information, Miller. We need to understand its operating parameters. How often does it open a gateway? Is it a passive effect, or does it respond to external stimuli? What are the limits of its influence? And most importantly, how do we either neutralize it or, if that's impossible, conceal it permanently from human discovery? What if the Park Service team is still there? I asked. Elena considered this. If they are, we observe from a distance. We don't engage directly. We wait for them to leave, or if they are in immediate danger, we formulate a rescue plan that minimizes exposure for everyone. We can't reveal the stone's true nature to them. They wouldn't believe us, and it could cause panic or worse, escalate the situation. It was a daunting task, fraught with unimaginable danger. But with Thorne's theories and Lena's practical expertise, I felt a glimmer of hope that we might actually achieve something. On the third morning, under a sky heavy with impending rain, we prepared to depart. Thorne walked us to the edge of his property, his face etched with a mix of excitement and concern. Remember, he said, his voice earnest, this is not a simple expedition. You are stepping into a realm where the laws of physics are merely suggestions. Be wary, be cautious. And whatever you do, do not touch the stone without absolute certainty of its intent. We don't know what kind of intelligence, if any, resides within or behind it. I shook his hand, feeling a profound gratitude for this eccentric scholar who believed me. Lena simply nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of a sturdy knife clipped to her belt. We'll keep in touch via the long-range comms, Thorne, Lena said. We'll send daily updates, or more frequently if there's a significant development. If we go silent for more than 24 hours after reaching the site, assume the worst. Thorne nodded, a grim expression on his face. May the currents guide you, and may the veil remain closed to that which should not pass. We turned and walked into the dense forest, leaving behind the last vestiges of civilization. The air grew heavier, the silence more profound with every step. The faint hum, which I had almost forgotten in the comfort of Thorne's cabin, began to assert itself again, a low thrum deep in my bones. Elena moved with the grace of a seasoned woodsman, her eyes constantly scanning the terrain, alert to every sound, every movement. I followed her, my ranger instincts kicking in, grateful for her quiet competence. She was an ideal partner for this impossible mission. We hiked for a day and a half, navigating through rugged terrain, crossing swollen streams, and battling dense undergrowth. Lena's drone provided invaluable reconnaissance, allowing us to bypass particularly difficult or potentially dangerous sections of the forest. The gray peaks were wild and unforgiving, but this time I felt a strange sense of belonging, a grim familiarity with the wilderness and the secret it held. As we neared the restricted sector, the strange phenomena began to intensify. Our new communication devices struggled, the signal breaking up with increasing static. Lena's GPS, though far more advanced than my old one, started to show erratic readings, mirroring my earlier experience. The air grew colder, and the pervasive silence settled upon us once more. I pulled out Thorne's resonance detector. Its delicate needle twitched, then slowly climbed, indicating a subtle but definite shift in the ambient energy. We're getting close, I murmured. Elena nodded, her expression serious. The drone is picking up significant interference. Visuals are degraded, but it's definitely showing a pronounced anomaly in the atmospheric energy readings ahead. We continued on foot, moving stealthily, our senses heightened. The metallic taste returned to my mouth, and the hum, now a deep, resonant thrum, vibrated through my entire body, making my teeth ache. Lena, though she couldn't feel it, noticed my change in demeanor. "The connection?" she asked, her voice quiet. I nodded, gripping the crystal pendant around my neck. It felt warm, a faint pulse emanating from it, a strange counterpoint to the hum in my head. Through the gloom of the ancient trees, I saw it again, the faint shimmer, the ethereal purple glow. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mixture of dread and grim anticipation. Lena's eyes widened slightly as she saw it too. "My God," she whispered, her usual composure momentarily broken. "It's real." We stopped at the edge of the clearing, hidden by the same cluster of ancient hemlocks where I had observed the stone before. The scene was exactly as I remembered. The perfectly circular pool, the obsidian stone hovering in its center, pulsing with its unearthly purple light, and the impossible stream flowing uphill from its edge. "Unbelievable," Lena breathed, pulling out a pair of binoculars and scanning the area. "The energy output, it's immense, far beyond anything I've ever recorded." She brought up her specialized handheld scanner. Its screen glowed with a cascade of complex data, indicating unprecedented energy fluctuations and distortions in the local spacetime continuum. We spent hours observing, setting up Lena's drone for silent aerial surveillance and taking meticulous readings from a safe distance. The drone, despite the interference, managed to capture some hazy, distorted images, confirming the stone's impossible suspension and the backward flow of the stream. "No sign of the Park Service team," Lena reported, checking her comms. "No active signals, no human footprint in the immediate vicinity. Either they haven't arrived yet, or they came and left, or something happened to them." The last possibility hung heavy in the air. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long, eerie shadows across the clearing, Lena made a decision. "We need to get closer, Ranger. We need better data. The drone can't penetrate the immediate field of influence without risking its systems." I nodded, feeling the familiar pull of the stone, the terrifying allure of the unknown. Careful, the water, when I touched it, I saw things, visions. Elena looked at me, her gaze intense. "Psychic projections, dimensional bleed-through, fascinating. Thorne mentioned that possibility. We'll approach with extreme caution, and we won't touch anything directly unless absolutely necessary." We moved slowly, deliberately, towards the edge of the pool, our boots sinking softly into the damp moss. The hum intensified with every step, growing into a deep, pervasive thrum that vibrated through my very bones. The air crackled with static, and the metallic taste in my mouth became almost unbearable. The crystal pendant around my neck grew warm, pulsing with a faint, steady beat. Elena's resonance detector glowed faintly, its needle maxed out. Her handheld scanner whirred, its display showing wildly fluctuating energy patterns. "This is extraordinary," she murmured, more to herself than to me. The energy field isn't static, it's dynamically shifting, almost like a living entity. We reached the edge of the pool just a few feet from the shimmering water. The obsidian stone pulsed with a mesmerizing rhythm, its purple light casting an otherworldly glow on our faces. The backward flowing stream gurgled softly, a sound that defied all logic. Lena knelt, carefully deploying a small, telescopic sensor array towards the pool. I want to analyze the water composition, the atmospheric gases, the localized gravitational field, everything we can get without direct contact. As the sensor array extended, a faint, iridescent ripple spread from the stone, just as I remembered. The water in the pool seemed to stir, its surface shimmering with an inner light. Then, without warning, the stone's pulse intensified. The purple light brightened, becoming more vivid, more insistent. The hum grew louder, more resonant, vibrating through the ground, up through our bodies. "It's reacting," I breathed, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. Elena's eyes widened, her fingers flying across her scanner's controls. Energy spike, gravitational anomalies increasing, localized spacetime distortions are off the charts. The water in the pool began to churn violently, swirling around the base of the floating stone. The uphill stream bucked and twisted, small geysers erupting from its surface. The air around the stone shimmered, warping the light, making the forest seem to twist and distort at the edges of our vision. The ground began to tremble, a deep, guttural rumble that shook the ancient trees. I instinctively grabbed Lena, pulling her back, away from the churning pool. The stone pulsed with blinding white-purple light, the intensity almost unbearable. The hum was now a deafening roar. My ears screaming in protest. I closed my eyes, shielding them with my arm, but the searing white-purple light burned through my eyelids, leaving blazing afterimages. The ground bucked violently beneath us, threatening to throw us off our feet. Ancient trees groaned and swayed, their roots visibly tearing at the earth. "Get down!" Lena yelled, her voice barely audible above the roar. She pulled me lower, pressing her body against the damp moss, trying to create some anchor against the chaotic forces unleashed. Her hands were clamped over her ears, her face pale, but her eyes, despite the pain, were still wide with a desperate, scientific curiosity. The stone pulsed again, even brighter, even louder. It felt as if the air itself was being ripped apart, stretched thin. The pressure was immense, crushing, as if every cell in my body was being squeezed. The crystal pendant around my neck grew searing hot, almost burning my skin. I could feel it vibrating against my chest, a desperate hum trying to counteract the stone's overwhelming energy. Then a sound unlike anything I had ever heard. A high-pitched, resonant shriek that pierced through the roar, tearing at my eardrums. It wasn't natural. It was a sound of pure, raw energy, of tearing reality. And through the blinding light, even with my eyes closed, I sensed a vast, yawning absence above us. The column of light, just as before, shot vertically from the stone, incinerating anything in its path. It wasn't merely piercing the canopy, it was obliterating it. I heard the sickening snap and crack of ancient timber, the roar of displaced air, and a faint, high-pitched whine that quickly faded as the column ascended. For a horrifying moment, the roar of the stone diminished slightly, as if its energy was being channeled entirely upwards. Elena, despite the chaos, tore her hands from her ears and fumbled for her scanner. Her fingers flew across the controls, trying to capture any flicker of data. "It's open," she shrieked, her voice hoarse. "A massive energy signature, dimensional breach confirmed. Oh my God, look." I forced my eyes open, squinting through the residual afterimages and the intense, receding glow. The column of light was retracting, sinking back into the obsidian stone, which now pulsed with a calmer but still vibrant purple. The deafening roar slowly subsided, replaced by the ringing in my ears and the thrumming of my own heart. Above us, framed by the tattered, smoking remnants of the canopy, was an impossibly perfect circle of brilliant blue sky. And through that sky, just as before, a swirling vortex of colors, a distant nebula, shimmering and shifting, beckoning. But this time it felt closer, more detailed. I could almost make out faint, ethereal structures within its depths, hints of the impossible cities I had glimpsed in the water. It was terrifyingly beautiful, a window into a universe that defied comprehension. "It's stabilizing," Lena murmured, her voice filled with awe, her eyes glued to the phenomenon. "The portal, it's holding. Longer than you described, Miller. It's not closing immediately." Indeed, the edges of the circular hole in the canopy remained perfectly sharp, the surrounding branches and leaves seeming to recoil from its impossible geometry. The swirling vortex above shimmered, revealing more and more intricate details. It felt like we were staring directly into the heart of another cosmos, a realm of pure energy and impossible architecture. Then, from the depths of the vortex, a faint, high-pitched song began to emanate. It wasn't a human song or an animal sound. It was a chorus of pure tones, complex and interwoven, that vibrated not just in the air but directly within my skull, bypassing my ears. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly alien. It felt like a message, a lament, a greeting, I couldn't tell which. Elena gasped, clutching her head. The sonic frequencies, they're resonating with my brainwaves. This is a direct neural interface. The singing intensified, growing louder, more insistent. It felt like my mind was being gently probed, sifted through by an unseen intelligence. The visions began again, unbidden, overwhelming. I saw flashes of the impossible cities, now closer, clearer. Towers of light reaching into an alien sky, intricate networks of glowing pathways, beings of pure energy flowing through structures that shimmered with an inner luminescence. But this time there was also a sense of direction, a feeling of being pulled, of being summoned. "Miller, resist it." Lena's voice was strained, distorted by the psychic onslaught. "It's trying to draw us in." I fought against the pull, clenching my fists, digging my fingers into the damp earth. My head throbbed, my teeth ached, and the metallic taste in my mouth was unbearable. The crystal pendant pulsed furiously, its warmth a desperate anchor against the invading consciousness. I focused on Lena, on the solid reality of her presence, trying to push back against the overwhelming alien influence. The singing continued, and a new element emerged. A faint, ethereal fragrance drifted down from the portal. It was impossible to describe, a mix of ozone, wildflowers from another world, and something ancient and metallic. It filled my lungs, making me lightheaded, further blurring the lines between reality and the visions. Then a sudden, sharp crack like thunder, and the song abruptly cut off. The fragrance vanished. The swirling vortex of colors above us shimmered violently, like water disturbed, and then began to recede rapidly. It's closing, Lena shouted, her voice laced with relief and a touch of disappointment. Her scanner screen flickered wildly, then settled on rapidly diminishing readings. As I watched, the impossibly perfect circle of blue sky began to shrink. The tattered, smoking edges of the canopy seemed to reach out, stretching, growing, knitting themselves back together with an unnatural speed. It was as if the forest was actively trying to forget what had just happened, to erase the wound in its fabric. In less than a minute, the hole was gone, replaced by the dense, interwoven branches, the only evidence of its passage the still smoking, charred edges of some of the leaves. The hum from the stone subsided to its usual resonant thrum. The water in the pool calmed, and the uphill stream resumed its steady, impossible flow. The crushing pressure in the air eased, replaced by the heavy silence of the deep forest. We lay there gasping, recovering from the intense sensory assault. My body ached, my head spun, and my ears still rang. Lena pushed herself up, slowly, her eyes wide, a trickle of blood escaping from one nostril. "My God, Miller," she breathed, wiping the blood away. That was unlike anything I've ever experienced. The sonic frequencies, the brainwave resonance, it was attempting to establish a direct communication, or perhaps a direct connection. She looked at me, a profound look of understanding in her eyes. "You said it pulls you back. You felt it. This is why. You're attuned. You're a conduit." "A conduit," I echoed, the word unsettling. "Yes, you've been exposed twice now. You've interacted with it on a fundamental level. Your system is more receptive to its influence. That pendant Thorn gave us, it helped, I think. It buffered some of the raw energy, but it couldn't stop the direct neural probing." She tapped the still warm crystal around her own neck. We spent several minutes just lying there, trying to regain our composure, to process the magnitude of what we had just witnessed. The stone, serene now in its pulsing purple glow, seemed to mock our efforts to understand it. "The Park Service team," I finally managed, my voice hoarse. "They were supposed to be here yesterday, do you think?" Lena's expression grew grim. "I don't know, the drone didn't pick up anything, but if they came into this clearing and that happened unprepared, it would be catastrophic." She stood, cautiously scanning the perimeter. "No signs of anyone, no equipment, no footprints other than ours. We need to sweep the area, cautiously." We began a slow, meticulous search of the clearing and the surrounding woods, staying clear of the immediate vicinity of the pool. Lena deployed a small ground-based sensor array designed to detect subtle disturbances in the earth, human presence, or discarded equipment. The only sign of previous human activity we found was a freshly snapped branch 100 yards upstream near the edge of the restricted zone. It looked like someone had broken it, forcing their way through thick brush, but it wasn't fresh enough to be from the Park Service team. It was from my previous exit when I ran blindly. We found nothing else. No footprints, no abandoned gear, no indication that a team of rangers or geologists had ever entered this clearing. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole, or they had never arrived. "This is highly unusual," Lena murmured, checking her scanner. "No trace whatsoever. Either they got within the influence and were completely disoriented, turning back before reaching the stone, or they encountered something we haven't." Or they were caught in the pulse, I suggested, remembering the blinding light and the intense pressure. If they were too close. Elena shook her head. The energy output was immense, but it was primarily directed upwards, creating the gateway. It wouldn't disintegrate a human being. Disorient, yes. Cause severe physiological distress, absolutely. But no residual energy signature consistent with total annihilation. What about the pull? I asked, thinking of the summoning sensation. What if it drew them in through the gateway? Elena's eyes widened, a flicker of horror passing through them. That's a terrifying possibility. If their minds were receptive, if they were disoriented and drawn towards the portal, but it would require an incredible coincidence of timing to be exactly here when it opens and be unable to resist. We continued our search for another hour, moving further out from the clearing, expanding our perimeter. Nothing. The silence was absolute, save for the rhythmic thrum from the stone, a constant reminder of the alien presence at the heart of this forest. As dusk began to settle, Lena decided we needed to establish a more permanent observation post. We can't stay in this clearing, it's too exposed. And whatever just happened, it might happen again. We need to monitor, but from a safe, concealed distance. We found a suitable location about half a mile away, on a rise overlooking the clearing, shrouded by dense ancient growth. It offered a good vantage point, and the ambient energy from the stone was significantly diminished there, making it easier to function. We quickly set up a discreet camp, unfurling a camouflage tarp and preparing our equipment. Lena deployed several remote sensors closer to the clearing, designed to transmit data back to our camp. That night, sleep was fitful. The phantom hum was still there, a constant reminder. Every rustle of leaves, every distant hoot of an owl sent shivers down my spine. The images of the swirling nebula and the impossible cities flashed behind my eyelids. I was keenly aware of the crystal pendant's warmth against my chest, a small, fragile barrier against the vast, terrifying unknown. Elena, despite the day's trauma, was already hunched over her laptop, analyzing the data she had managed to capture. Her face was illuminated by the screen's glow, her brow furrowed in concentration. The energy signature is unlike anything in any known scientific database, she reported, her voice hushed, almost reverent. It's a unique form of energy, fluctuating across multiple dimensions, creating temporary localized spacetime distortions. And the sonic frequencies, they are incredibly complex, containing information, structured information. It was indeed a communication attempt. What kind of information? I asked, leaning closer. That's the difficult part. It's not a language as we understand it. It's more akin to a resonant frequency pattern, a mathematical construct. Thorne might have some insight, but it would take weeks, months even, to even begin to decipher it, if it can be deciphered at all by human minds. And the pull. The pull is a resonance effect. Your body, your consciousness, is vibrating in sympathy with the stone's output. It's creating a harmonic frequency that literally draws you towards it. It's not malicious, I don't think. It's simply seeking connection. You are an antenna, Miller, a receiver. Perhaps the only one in range that could process its signal. The thought was both terrifying and strangely empowering. I was part of this now, intertwined with the stone's mystery. What about the Park Service? I pressed. You really think they just vanished? Lena turned from her laptop, her expression serious. I'm afraid I have a working hypothesis, Miller. It's wild, even for Thorne's theories, but it's the only one that fits the complete lack of evidence. If the stone is a gateway, and if it can attune to consciousness, what if it didn't just open a gateway to another reality, but also created a temporary, localized bubble of another reality? A pocket dimension, perhaps. My blood ran cold. You means they might be here, but not here. Precisely. If they were caught within the immediate field of influence when the gateway opened, perhaps they weren't pulled through it, but rather were absorbed into a temporary fold of spacetime. A localized phase shift. They could be standing right next to us in a slightly different dimensional frequency, completely unaware, completely invisible to our reality. Is that even possible? Elena shrugged. According to some of Thorne's more obscure texts on liminal spaces and dimensional bleed-through, it is. It's a mechanism for the universe to protect itself, to contain anomalies. It literally folds them out of existence in our perception. They're still there, just on a slightly different frequency. The idea was mind-bending, yet it explained everything. The missing team, the erratic GPS, the blurring satellite imagery. It wasn't atmospheric interference, it was dimensional interference. If that's true, I said slowly, how do we find them? How do we bring them back? That's the critical question, Lena admitted, her gaze returning to the pulsing purple light of the distant stone. We need to understand how the stone modulates these dimensional shifts, what triggers them, and most importantly, whether they are reversible. This goes far beyond geology, Miller. This is theoretical physics made terrifyingly real. Over the next 2 days, we maintained a constant vigil. Lena deployed more sophisticated remote sensors, attempting to map the energy field's fluctuations to identify any patterns in the stone's pulses. We established a rigorous schedule of observation and data collection, trying to minimize our exposure while maximizing our understanding. We learned that the stone's pulse was not entirely random. There was a subtle, almost imperceptible rhythm to its intensification, a slow buildup of energy followed by a brief, more vivid flash of light which then receded. It was like a slow, deep breath. Lena theorized that the more violent gateway opening was a culmination of this breathing cycle, a massive exhale of energy that tore open the fabric of reality. The previous opening, triggered by my initial water sampling, must have been a localized, smaller exhalation. This one, a full-blown event. We tried to communicate with Thorne using Lena's long-range comms, but the signal was too distorted. Only sporadic bursts of static and fragmented words reached us. The stone's influence was too pervasive. We were on our own. On the third morning, as the sun began to filter through the canopy, Lena, while reviewing the latest sensor data, let out a sharp gasp. Miller, look at this, the atmospheric resonance, it's building again, slowly but unmistakably. The stone is preparing for another exhalation. I rushed to her side, peering at the display. The complex waveforms on the screen showed a definite upward trend. The faint hum, which had been a constant companion, was indeed growing stronger, more resonant. How long? I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Lena rapidly reconfigured her algorithms. Based on the rate of acceleration, I'd estimate roughly 24 to 36 hours until another major event, another gateway opening. My mind reeled: another opening, another chance to observe, to gather data, but also another chance for catastrophe. And this time we were here, fully aware. "We need to be ready," I said, my voice grim. "We need to be closer, Lena. If we want to understand how it works, how to potentially close it or control it, we need to be there when it happens." Lena nodded, her eyes alight with a mixture of fear and fierce determination. "Agreed. This is our window. We need to set up a forward observation post closer to the clearing, but with an escape route planned. We need to be able to record every nuance, every energy fluctuation, every sonic frequency." We spent the rest of the day carefully scouting for a new position. We found a shallow cave, tucked away behind a thick curtain of ivy and dense undergrowth, less than 100 yards from the clearing. It was small, damp, and smelled of earth, but it offered excellent concealment and a relatively secure position from which to observe. Crucially, it had a narrow, winding crevice at the back that Lena believed could serve as an emergency escape tunnel, leading further into the dense forest. We moved our essential equipment, setting up Lena's advanced recording devices, directional microphones, and a specialized spectrograph that could analyze the light emitted by the stone. We rigged up a small, portable power source, ensuring everything was ready for the impending event. As night fell, the hum was already a low thrum that vibrated through the rock walls of our makeshift cave. The metallic taste in my mouth was constant. The crystal pendant pulsed with renewed intensity. Elena, despite the tension, was in her element. Her hands moved with a practiced grace, setting up the final sensors, calibrating the instruments. "This is it, Miller," she said, her voice hushed. "The closest we've ever been to truly understanding or to being utterly overwhelmed." We kept a silent vigil through the night. The stone's purple light, visible through a narrow gap in the ivy, seemed to brighten and deepen with each passing hour, its pulse growing stronger, more insistent. The low thrum became a pervasive drone, vibrating through the very rock of the cave. Around dawn, the energy readings on Lena's main monitor began to spike dramatically. "We're entering the critical phase," she announced, her voice tight with anticipation. "The energy is converging. Gravitational distortions are intensifying. Get ready." We positioned ourselves at the mouth of the cave, peering through the ivy. The clearing was bathed in an eerie purple glow. The air crackled with static, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. The water in the pool was already swirling, slowly at first, then picking up speed. The uphill stream twisted and bucked. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the accelerating pulse of the stone. Dread coiled in my stomach, but this time it was tempered by a strange, almost manic excitement. This was it, the moment of truth. The hum rose into a deafening roar. The stone's light intensified, becoming blinding white-purple. The ground began to tremble violently, sending dust and small rocks raining down from the cave's ceiling. "It's happening," Lena yelled, her hands flying across the controls of her recording equipment. Every needle on every dial slammed against its maximum. The spectrograph displayed a chaotic explosion of light frequencies. The directional microphones picked up a cacophony of impossible sounds, the tearing of reality, the thunderous resonance, and underlying it all, a faint, almost subliminal singing. I gripped the crystal pendant, its warmth now a burning heat against my chest. My vision blurred, my head spun. The crushing pressure returned, pressing in on me from all sides. I fought to stay conscious, to process what I was seeing. Then, from the stone, the blinding column of white-purple light erupted upwards, tearing through the canopy with an ear-splitting crack. It wasn't just a hole this time, it was a gaping wound, a swirling maw of pure energy. And as the light column pulsed, a dark shape began to coalesce within the swirling vortex above. It was faint at first, a ripple in the fabric of light and color like a distortion in water. Then it grew clearer, solidifying, a form, not like the shimmering cities I had seen, not like the beings of pure energy. This was corporeal, tangible. Lena gasped, her eyes wide with terror and disbelief. No, that's not possible. An object, it's not just a window, it's a passage. The shape elongated, stretched, descended. It was massive, impossibly huge, yet it moved with an almost graceful slowness. It was sleek, metallic, with no visible seams or points of articulation. Its surface gleamed with an inner light, reflecting the myriad colors of the swirling vortex around it. It looked like an impossibly large, elongated teardrop, crafted from liquid shadow and starlight. As it descended, the sonic frequencies intensified, becoming a chilling, reverberating hum that resonated deep within my chest, making my bones ache. The singing began again, this time not a chorus, but a single, piercing, alien note resonating from the approaching object itself. It felt like a direct communication, a focused intent. The object drifted slowly, steadily downwards, growing larger, more defined, filling the impossible hole in the sky. It was utterly silent, a phantom descent, its only audible presence the terrifying, resonant hum that vibrated through the very air. "It's coming through," Lena whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Something is coming through the gateway." The object was now close enough to perceive its incredible scale. It was easily hundreds of feet long, dwarfing the ancient trees. Its surface was obsidian smooth, reflecting the pulsing purple light of the stone below it, making it seem almost alive, a predatory entity emerging from another dimension. There were no windows, no visible propulsion, no discernible features, just that sleek, dark, luminous form. It paused, hovering directly above the stone, an impossible silhouette against the swirling cosmic backdrop. The alien hum resonated with an unbearable intensity. The stone below it pulsed with a frantic, blinding light, as if in communication or in servitude. Then a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer rippled across the underside of the descending object. It was like a mirage, a distortion in the air, but it began to grow, to coalesce, to open. A section of the sleek hull seemed to melt away, revealing not an interior but a void, a darker-than-dark opening framed by glowing purple light. And from that opening, something began to emerge. It was humanoid in shape, but impossibly tall, easily 12 feet or more. Its form was slender, almost ethereal, shimmering with a faint internal luminescence that shifted between shades of deep indigo and violet. It had no discernible facial features, just a smooth, elongated head that tapered to a point. Its limbs were long and graceful, ending in delicate, multi-jointed digits. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, hovering just above the opening, suspended in the air. It was alien, terribly, profoundly alien. Lena gasped, pressing herself back against the rock of the cave, her breath catching in her throat. Her scientific instruments were useless now, their screens a chaotic scramble of overmaxed readings. Her comms were dead. We were utterly isolated, utterly vulnerable. The creature's head-like structure slowly turned, sweeping across the clearing, its internal light intensifying as if it was actively scanning, observing. It paused, and I felt its gaze, a psychic weight, pass over our concealed cave. There was no physical eye contact, no discernible optical sensors, but I knew it saw us. I felt its presence in my mind, a cold, probing touch, a whisper of a question. The crystal pendant around my neck pulsed with violent intensity, burning against my skin as if trying to shield me, to push back against the alien's psychic probe. The creature descended further, slowly, gracefully, until its feet-like appendages rested gently on the surface of the floating stone. Its luminous form cast long, shifting shadows across the churning water of the pool. It stood there, motionless, like a silent sentinel. Then, from the portal above, more forms began to emerge. Smaller this time, perhaps 8 feet tall, but equally slender and luminous. 2 of them, then 3, then 4. They arrayed themselves around the first, larger being, forming a silent, watchful semicircle. The entire scene was utterly surreal, a tableau of alien arrival, played out in the heart of our familiar forest. It was a moment that shattered every preconceived notion of reality, of humanity's place in the universe. The leader, the larger one, slowly raised one of its multi-jointed hands. Its luminous fingers extended, pointing towards the turbulent water of the pool. As it did so, the water began to churn with renewed ferocity, and the purple light from the stone intensified once more. Then, from the surface of the pool, directly in front of the alien being, a column of water began to rise slowly, gracefully. It didn't splash or break, it solidified, taking on a strange, translucent quality, shimmering with an inner light. It coiled upwards, forming a perfectly smooth, crystal-clear column, reaching towards the alien's outstretched hand. The alien's hand met the top of the water column. There was no sound, no discernible interaction, but as their forms touched, a wave of profound energy emanated from the point of contact, washing over the clearing, over us. It was a wave of pure information, of thought, of an ancient alien intelligence. The visions exploded in my mind with an unprecedented clarity and intensity. I saw not just nebulae and cities, but coherent sequences, narratives. I saw vast, cosmic wars, fleets of starships made of living light, battles fought across galaxies. I saw planets terraformed, civilizations rising and falling, and then a sequence that focused on our solar system, on Earth. I saw ancient Earth teeming with primordial life. And then a fleeting glimpse of them, the luminous beings observing, subtly guiding, nurturing life on Earth from afar. They were not invaders, they were gardeners. But then the vision shifted. A sense of urgency, of panic, began to permeate the narrative. A looming threat, something vast and destructive, approaching our galaxy. The luminous beings who called themselves the Veilkeepers, in a flash of understanding that bypassed language, were desperately trying to prepare, to protect, to hide something. And then the stone, I saw it being placed on earth, not formed naturally, but deliberately, carefully positioned within the gray peaks. It was a beacon, a defense, a gateway, a final hope. It pulsed with a desperate energy, a plea. The visions were overwhelming, assaulting my senses, pushing the limits of my consciousness. I heard Lena cry out beside me, her own mind reeling from the psychic influx. The larger alien being slowly withdrew its hand from the water column. The column dissolved, gracefully sinking back into the pool. The creature then lowered its hand, pointing now towards the surrounding forest, slowly sweeping its gaze across the ancient trees. As it did so, the area it scanned seemed to shimmer, to flicker at the edges of my vision. It wasn't a physical effect, but a localized disruption in the dimensional fabric. I recognized it immediately. This was how they created the pocket dimensions. This was how they made things vanish. And this was what had happened to the Park Service team. A sickening realization washed over me. They weren't trying to find the Park Service team. They were ensuring no one else was here, ensuring their arrival remained unnoticed, and they were about to ensure our disappearance. The alien's gaze, its invisible scan, paused, lingering on the section of forest where our cave was hidden. I felt the cold, probing touch intensify, a direct penetration into my thoughts. It was assessing us, not with malice, but with a cold, detached evaluation, like a gardener deciding which weeds to pluck. They know we're here, I whispered, my voice hoarse, strained. They saw us. Elena, tears streaming down her face, nodded, barely able to speak. Though the scans, they registered our presence. We're in their field of vision. The smaller aliens, the escorts, shifted their positions slightly, turning their smooth, featureless heads towards our hiding place. The hum intensified again, a sense of immeasurable power building, converging. The larger alien slowly raised its hand again, its luminous fingers stretching, pointing directly at our cave. "Run, Lena," I shouted, pushing her towards the back of the cave, towards the narrow crevice we had scouted as an escape route. "Go now." She hesitated for a split second, her eyes wide with terror and a desperate longing to understand, but the raw, primal fear of imminent dimensional eradication spurred her. She scrambled into the narrow opening, disappearing into the darkness. I didn't follow immediately. My gaze was fixed on the alien, on its raised hand, on the shimmering distortion that was already beginning to coalesce around our cave. I knew I couldn't outrun it, but I also knew I had to draw its attention to buy Lena time. The connection with the stone, with the alien, was overwhelming now. The visions, the knowledge, the desperate plea of the Veilkeepers, it all flooded my mind. I understood their mission. I understood the threat. And I understood that my presence, our presence, was an unforeseen anomaly in their ancient, intricate plan. A surge of defiant energy coursed through me. I reached into my pack, pulling out the small, waterproof container with the water sample I had collected from the stream. It was a desperate, foolish act, but I had to try something. With a primal yell that tore from my throat, I launched myself out of the cave, directly into the clearing, towards the stone, towards the hovering aliens. "Hey," I screamed, my voice cracking, but laced with a desperate fury. We're here, we know what you are, we know what this is." The larger alien's head-like structure snapped towards me, its internal light flaring with an intensity that burned my retinas. The humming grew impossibly loud, and the ground shuddered violently. The dimensional distortion around our cave shimmered, then collapsed in on itself, becoming a localized pocket of pure nothingness where the entrance had been. The cave and Lena were gone. But she had gotten through the crevice. I prayed she had. I stumbled forward, my legs threatening to give out, the water sample clutched in my hand. The other aliens, the escorts, turned towards me, their luminous forms radiating a subtle, almost imperceptible menace. They began to drift forward slowly, gracefully, fanning out as if to intercept. The visions, the cosmic history, the desperate warning of the Veilkeepers filled my mind. They were hiding something. They were protecting humanity from a greater threat, and I was now a wild variable, a disruptive element. "You're protecting us," I shouted, my voice raw. "From what? What's coming?" The leader alien, still hovering above the stone, slowly lowered its hand, its entire form shimmering with an ethereal glow. It wasn't a hostile gesture, not overtly. It was an acknowledgement, an assessment. Then, from the center of its smooth, featureless head, a single, impossibly bright beam of pure, white-purple light erupted. It was narrow, focused, and directed straight at me. I braced myself, my instincts screaming for me to run, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. This was it, the end. But the beam didn't hit me. It struck the crystal pendant around my neck. The pendant flared with a blinding, incandescent light, absorbing the alien beam. A wave of pure energy, of raw, unfiltered thought slammed into my mind, pushing past the Veilkeepers' history, past their warnings. It wasn't a vision. It was a direct download, a language of pure concepts woven directly into my consciousness. I understood. The Veilkeepers weren't just protectors, they were gatekeepers. The stone was not just a portal, but a seal, and the threat wasn't just coming, it was already here. It was the very fabric of the universe, decaying, unraveling, a cosmic entropy that they had been fighting for millennia. The gateway wasn't for travel, not anymore. It was a point of weakness, a desperate attempt to shore up the collapsing reality, to hold back the encroaching void. The previous openings were not intentional, they were breaches. The stone, their last hope, was failing. And the object that had just emerged from the gateway, the massive teardrop-shaped craft, was not theirs. It was the advance guard of the void. It was here to accelerate the decay, to shatter the seal. The beam from the alien's head intensified, and the crystal pendant around my neck flared even brighter, absorbing, transmuting, reflecting. The energy wasn't destroying me, it was changing me. I felt my consciousness expanding, encompassing vast amounts of alien data, understanding concepts that no human mind should grasp. The Veilkeepers, the luminous beings, shifted, their forms radiating alarm. They were not pointing their weapons at me, they were pointing them at the colossal, teardrop-shaped vessel above the stone. The larger alien, the leader, turned its smooth head upwards, its internal. Leader turned its smooth head upwards, its internal light flaring with an intensity that burned my retinas. Its luminescent body rippled with what I now understood to be a profound, ancient terror. The other Veil Keepers, the smaller escorts, spun to face the looming craft, their forms radiating not malice but a desperate readiness. The beam from the leader's head still pulsed, connecting with the crystal pendant around my neck. It felt less like a beam now and more like a conduit, a superhighway of pure thought. My consciousness was no longer merely expanding, it was being rewritten, augmented. I was downloading millennia of information in mere seconds. The language of pure concepts flowed into me, a universal grammar of physics, of dimensions, of existence itself. The void, that was the name, not a place but an anti-existence, a cosmic decay. It was the natural enemy of all life, a fundamental entropic force that sought to unravel the ordered fabric of the universe. The Veil Keepers, an ancient civilization that had transcended physical form into beings of pure, luminous energy, had dedicated their existence to holding back this encroaching nothingness. The gray peak stone was not just a seal. It was a cosmic pressure valve, a focal point where the Veil Keepers had painstakingly woven reality itself into a fragile shield against the void's relentless advance. The previous openings, my own accidental trigger and the one that had just occurred, were symptoms of this seal weakening, not intentional acts of portal creation. The Veil Keepers were not opening gateways, they were desperately trying to contain them. The teardrop craft above us wasn't a ship in the conventional sense. It was a manifestation of the void itself, a probe, an emissary of non-being, sent to exploit the weakness in the Veil Keepers' cosmic defenses. Its presence here meant the seal was failing, and the Veil Keepers' millennia-long vigil was nearing its catastrophic end. The beam from the leader's head receded, pulling back into its luminous form. The pendant, now cool against my chest, still vibrated with residual energy, a faint hum echoing the new knowledge thrumming in my veins. My mind felt stretched, overflowing, yet strangely calm. I was no longer Miller, the park ranger. I was Miller, the unwilling recipient of cosmic truth. The Veil Keepers were moving. The leader, its luminous form shimmering with urgency, launched itself upwards, directly at the immense teardrop craft. The other four followed, their movements no longer graceful or deliberate, but swift and purposeful. They moved like living rays of light, converging on the dark, impossibly smooth hull of the void vessel. As they neared, their forms began to pulse with a blinding internal light, a vibrant, burning indigo that seemed to emanate from their very core. Streaks of this light shot from their elongated limbs, impacting the teardrop craft. There was no explosion, no sound of impact, but where the light touched, the dark, seamless surface of the vessel seemed to ripple, to briefly distort, as if reality itself was being bruised. The void craft, in response, began to emit a low, guttural thrum, a sound that wasn't heard with my ears but felt directly in my chest, a deep, resonant vibration that threatened to loosen my very bones. From its obsidian-smooth surface, faint, dark tendrils began to writhe, extending outwards like liquid shadow, reaching for the attacking Veil Keepers. These tendrils were not physical, they were currents of anti-energy, seeking to drain the light, the life, from the luminous beings. The battle was silent, a ballet of light and shadow, of existence against non-existence, played out directly above the churning pool. The Veil Keepers, with their pure light, fought to shore up the weakened dimensional fabric, to push the void craft back. The void craft, with its insidious tendrils of darkness, sought to unravel their efforts, to tear open the seal entirely. I stood there, a lone, insignificant human caught between cosmic forces, my mind reeling from the impossible knowledge I now possessed. My ranger instinct screamed for me to take cover, to run, but a deeper, more profound sense of duty, instilled by the sudden download of information, rooted me to the spot. I understood the stakes. The entire universe, or at least this corner of it, hung in the balance, and somehow I was involved. My gaze fell on the obsidian stone, still pulsing with purple light, the heart of this cosmic struggle. The visions from the water, the impossible cities, the cosmic wars, they were not mere premonitions, but echoes of the Veilkeeper's history, their long, desperate fight. And the stone itself was not just a beacon, but a focal point, a linchpin, a desperate last resort. I remembered the water sample still clutched in my hand, the water from the uphill stream, the water that defied gravity, that carried visions. The crystal pendant around my neck, thorns, psychic shielding, was more than that. It was an amplifier, a translator, a resonant conduit. A sudden, jarring thought jolted me. Lena, I had pushed her into the crevice. Had she made it? The dimensional distortion had collapsed around the cave entrance. It was gone, folded out of existence. But the crevice was behind the entrance, a separate escape route. She was a survivalist. She was smart. She had to have gotten through. The thought was a desperate prayer. The battle above intensified. The Veilkeepers were being pushed back. The dark tendrils from the void craft were growing stronger, longer, visibly sapping the light from the luminous beings. One of the smaller Veilkeepers faltered, its indigo glow dimming perceptibly as a tendril wrapped around it, threatening to extinguish its very essence. "No," I shouted, a guttural sound torn from my chest. I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. But what? What could a single human do against cosmic entropy? My gaze snapped back to the stone. The void craft was descending slowly, inexorably, towards it. It was trying to destabilize the seal, to fracture the stone. If it succeeded, the entire planet, perhaps even the solar system, would be consumed by the encroaching nothingness. The knowledge from the pendant surged again. The stone was a pressure valve. The Veilkeepers were trying to repair it, to reinforce it. The void was trying to break it. My prior interaction, my touch on the water, had caused a minor breach, an exhalation. But the ritual, the song, the connection that had almost drawn me in was a desperate, ancient Veilkeeper method of recalling the lost energy, of resealing the breach. They had seen me as a potential conduit, an unwitting key. I stared at the water sample in my hand. It was the same water that flowed from the stone, the water that defied natural law, the water that held the visions. It was pure, raw energy from the liminal space, from the heart of the seal itself. An insane idea sparked in my mind, born of desperation and the alien knowledge now flooding my consciousness. If the stone was a capacitor and the water its charge, could I recharge it? Could I use the pendant as an amplifier to funnel energy back into the stone to help the Veilkeepers? It was a long shot, a crazy gamble, but I had no other options. I ran towards the pool, heedless of the cosmic battle raging above. The ground shuddered violently, small rocks bouncing around my feet. The air crackled with a sickening energy, a mixture of Veilkeeper light and void antimatter. "Miller, get back!" A voice, faint and distorted by the chaotic energies, cut through the roar of the battle. Lena, she was alive. The sound came from the dense undergrowth to my left, further down from the collapsed cave entrance near where the crevice would emerge. She must have made it. I have to, I yelled back, knowing she probably couldn't hear me, but needing to articulate the desperate plan even to myself. The Veilkeepers, sensing my movement, briefly shifted their attention. The leader, still locked in a desperate struggle with a tendril of darkness, turned its featureless head towards me, its internal light pulsing rapidly, a clear signal of alarm. They didn't understand what I was doing. They just knew I was approaching the stone in the midst of the battle. I reached the edge of the pool. The water churned violently around the hovering stone, its surface reflecting the kaleidoscopic battle above. The purple light from the stone itself seemed to dim and brighten erratically, flickering like a dying ember. I knelt, ignoring the violent tremors, the crackling air, the terrifying hum from the void craft. I uncorked the small, waterproof container with trembling fingers. The water inside glowed faintly, a microcosm of the stone's unearthly energy. I looked at the crystal pendant around my neck. It was still warm, still humming with the transmitted knowledge. This was the key. With a deep breath, I plunged the pendant into the swirling water of the pool, simultaneously pouring the water sample from the container directly onto the stone itself. A blinding flash erupted. It wasn't a violent explosion, but a sudden, intense surge of light that originated from the point where the pendant, the sample, and the stone connected. The purple light of the stone flared not erratically, but steadily, powerfully, turning a brilliant, incandescent white. The crystal pendant around my neck began to vibrate with an unimaginable intensity, a resonant hum that harmonized with the stone's newfound brilliance. The water in the pool ceased its churning. It became utterly still, reflecting the white-hot light of the stone like a perfectly polished mirror. The uphill stream, which had been bucking and twisting, now flowed with a smooth, silent grace, its flow intensifying, a steady current of pure energy. The Veilkeepers above us recoiled, their luminous forms flaring with shock and surprise. Even the void craft seemed to hesitate, its dark tendrils momentarily retracting. The stone was humming, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated not just through the ground, but through the air, through my very bones. It was a song of reawakening, of immense power being unleashed. The white light from the stone wasn't just light, it was pure energy, pure information, pure existence. It radiated outwards, creating a visible, shimmering field that pushed back against the encroaching darkness of the void craft. The dark tendrils from the vessel, which had been so aggressive, now seemed to wither and recoil within this field of light. The void craft itself began to ascend, slowly at first, then rapidly, its guttural thrum turning into a frantic, high-pitched whine. The white light from the stone was actively repelling it, pushing it back towards the fading vortex above. The Veilkeepers, witnessing this sudden, dramatic reversal, moved with renewed vigor. Their indigo forms blazed brighter than before, empowered by the stone's resurgence. They converged on the retreating void craft, their luminous streaks of light now tearing at its dark hull with far greater effect. Where their light hit, the craft seemed to flicker, as if struggling to maintain its coherence. The Veilkeeper leader, still observing my actions, sent a powerful, direct thought into my mind through the pendant. You have awoken the core, the primal energy. You have become a conduit. The sheer power flowing through me was overwhelming. I felt connected to the stone, to the Veil Keepers, to the very fabric of reality they defended. The cosmic entropy of the void was anathema to me, an affront to the newfound knowledge I possessed. I looked at the Veil Keepers. They were pressing their attack, driving the void craft back towards the portal, but it was still a desperate struggle. The portal itself, the gaping maw in the sky, was beginning to destabilize, flickering at the edges as if the sudden surge of energy from the stone was tearing at its own structure. The portal was a wound, not a gate. The stone was meant to seal it, not open it further. My actions, while repelling the void, were also massively overcharging the stone, making it volatile. The Veilkeeper leader sent another thought, urgent, desperate. The seal is overloaded. It must be stabilized. You must harmonize the frequencies. Harmonize the frequencies? What did that even mean? My human mind, even with the expanded consciousness, struggled to grasp the alien concept. But the feeling, the intent, was clear. The stone was too powerful now, too wild. It needed to be brought back into balance to properly reseal the rift. I closed my eyes, focusing on the thrumming of the pendant, on the immense, radiating power of the stone beneath my hands. The entire clearing was bathed in its incandescent white light. The air vibrated with a deafening hum that was both exhilarating and terrifying. I reached out not with my physical hands, but with my consciousness, pushing past the overwhelming energy, searching for the core frequency, the fundamental vibration of the stone. The pendant pulsed, guiding me, translating the alien input into something my mind could process. It was like trying to find a single note in a deafening symphony, then trying to conduct the entire orchestra with it. It was impossibly difficult. My head throbbed, my nose began to bleed again, and a searing pain shot through my temples. But I pushed through it, fueled by the desperate knowledge that this was humanity's last, best hope. I found it a deep, resonant, pulsing frequency, the primal heart of the stone, the rhythm of its existence. It was a harmonic, a universal constant. I grasped it, focused on it, and then, with all my might, I began to push it, to project it outwards, to resonate with the wild energy of the stone. As I did so, the white light from the stone didn't diminish, but it changed. It pulsed with a rhythmic ebb and flow, like a living heart. The chaotic, overwhelming energy began to coalesce, to organize itself. The intense hum became a steady, powerful drone, a focused energy. The Veilkeepers above seemed to respond to this shift. Their attacks on the void craft became more coordinated, more effective. The craft, now clearly damaged, its surface flickering and distorting, was being forced rapidly upwards. The vortex in the sky, the gaping wound, began to shrink slowly but visibly. The edges of the impossible hole started to knit back together, the swirling colors of the nebula receding. The Veilkeepers had found their opening. The reinforced seal, balanced by my intervention, was giving them the upper hand. They continued to assault the void craft, pushing it relentlessly towards the closing portal. The craft shrieked, a high-pitched, desperate sound that spoke of its defeat. With a final, concerted push, the Veilkeepers drove the void craft through the rapidly diminishing vortex. There was a blinding flash, a ripple in the fabric of reality, and then the vortex snapped shut like a cosmic eye closing. Silence. Not the heavy, oppressive silence that preceded the stone's awakening, but a profound, almost reverent silence. The clearing was no longer bathed in searing white light, but in a soft, steady, vibrant purple glow from the stone, now perfectly still in the center of the pool. The water was calm, reflecting the deep purple like liquid amethyst. The uphill stream flowed with a gentle, consistent murmur. Above, the canopy was still tattered and smoking, a stark reminder of the battle, but the impossible whole was gone. Only the normal blue sky, visible through the ragged branches, remained. I lay there slumped at the edge of the pool, utterly exhausted, my body aching, my mind buzzing with the residual alien knowledge. My nose was still bleeding and my head throbbed, but I felt a profound sense of peace, of something immense having been accomplished. The pendant lay heavy against my chest, no longer burning but warm, a gentle comfort. The Veilkeepers descended, slowly, gracefully, their luminous forms still shimmering with a faint, residual indigo light. They landed silently around the stone, forming a respectful circle, their attention now solely on me. The leader, the taller one, knelt before me, its smooth, featureless head bowing slightly. Then it raised a luminous, multi-jointed hand, and with an incredible delicacy placed it on my forehead. Another surge of energy, but this time it was gentle, soothing, like a balm to my battered mind. It wasn't a download, it was a sharing. A sense of immense gratitude, of profound respect, flowed into me. They weren't thanking me for saving them, they were thanking me for saving the seal, for allowing them to continue their ancient vigil. And then, a farewell. They were leaving, not abandoning the stone, but retreating to the deeper, more profound dimensions to continue their work of repairing the damage, of strengthening the cosmic defenses. The stone was stable again, balanced. Their immediate presence was no longer needed. The leader withdrew its hand. The Veilkeepers, one by one, turned towards the stone. Their luminous forms began to shimmer, to blur, to become translucent. They were dissolving, receding, slipping away into another dimension, like phantoms fading with the dawn. In a matter of seconds, they were gone. The clearing was empty save for me, the stone, and the calming purple light. I sat up slowly, pushing myself to my feet. The metallic taste in my mouth was gone. The hum was still there, but it was faint, a gentle thrum that seemed to emanate from my own being as much as from the stone. I felt different, changed, not just mentally, but physically. A new clarity in my senses, a subtle attunement to the world around me. The crystal pendant, a deep indigo now, pulsed with a gentle, steady rhythm. It was fused with me, a part of me. Miller, the voice, sharp with concern, broke through the profound silence. Lena. I turned towards the sound. She emerged from the undergrowth, her clothes torn, her face streaked with dirt and fear, but her eyes alight with a fierce relief. She held a small but heavy branch ready to defend herself. She stopped dead at the edge of the clearing, her gaze sweeping from the still glowing stone to my transformed state. Her branch fell to the ground with a soft thud. You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. I felt the energy shift. What happened? What are those things?" I walked towards her, my steps steady, my mind clear. "They are the Veilkeepers, Lena, and they are gone for now." I touched the pendant. "And this stone is a seal, not a portal. It holds back the void." She looked at me, her scientific mind struggling to reconcile what she had seen with what she knew. The void, you mean cosmic decay, anti-existence? Yes, I confirmed, the knowledge flowing effortlessly. It's here. It's always been here, trying to break through. The Veil Keepers were keeping it at bay, but the seal was failing. It breached. And that colossal thing, that was the void itself. An emissary, an advance guard. I glanced at the still smoking canopy. It tried to exploit the weakness to shatter the seal, but we stopped it. She looked at me, then at the stone, then back at me. Her expression was a mix of terror, wonder, and a deep, intellectual hunger. You were communicating with them, weren't you? You know things, tell me everything. I nodded, I will, but first we need to secure this area. And we need to communicate with Thorn, he needs to know. We made our way back to our makeshift camp, or what was left of it. The dimensional folding had indeed taken the entrance to the shallow cave, but the crevice Lena used to escape was untouched. Her equipment, thankfully, was still mostly intact, though her laptop was fried from the earlier energy surges. The remote sensors near the clearing were also dead, burnt out by the intensity of the event. Lena immediately started trying to re-establish comms with Thorn, her fingers flying across the controls of her backup satellite phone. After several agonizing minutes of static and fractured signals, a voice, Thorn's voice, crackled through, faint but clear. Lena, Miller, is that you? What in God's name happened? My instruments went wild, massive energy fluctuations, then total silence. Are you all right? Lena grabbed the mic, her voice trembling with barely suppressed excitement and exhaustion. Thorn, we're alive. We're more than all right. It happened, Thorn. Everything you theorized and more. The stone, it's a seal. And the Veil Keepers, they're real. We just fought a battle, Thorn, a cosmic battle against the void itself. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Thorn's voice hushed with an almost religious fervor. The void, it's truly here, and the Veil Keepers, they revealed themselves. Yes, I interjected, taking the mic. Thorn, I made contact, I understand. The stone isn't a portal to explore, it's a bulwark, a defense against universal decay. The Veil Keepers are its guardians, and it was failing, but we helped them stabilize it. I paused, searching for the right words to convey the immensity of what had transpired. The pendant, Thorn, it became a conduit. I absorbed knowledge, cosmic knowledge. Another long pause from Thorn. Miller, my dear Ranger Miller, you've become a part of it, haven't you? You're attuned, you're a bridge. His voice was filled with an almost childish glee, overriding the terror. This is beyond anything I could have dreamed. The Park Service team, Lena said, her voice turning serious. They're still gone, Thorn. Miller thinks they might have been caught in a localized dimensional shift, folded out of our reality. Thorn's giddy excitement immediately faded, replaced by a grim resolve. A phase shift, yes, that's consistent with the older texts. It's a containment mechanism to prevent unwanted leakage or observation. If they were too close, it would be an irreversible process, I fear. They are likely in a parallel frequency, oblivious to our world and we to theirs. We cannot bring them back without risking another catastrophic breach. The words struck me hard. Henderson and the others lost. Forever. My accidental discovery, my initial touch, had set a terrible chain of events in motion. But if I hadn't come back, if Lena and I hadn't been there, the entire planet would have been consumed. A cold comfort. "What now, Thorn?" I asked, my voice heavy. The void was repelled, but for how long? And the stone, it's stable, but is it permanent? "Nothing is permanent in the face of cosmic entropy, Miller," Thorn replied, his voice regaining some of its scholarly weight. "But for now, you have bought us time, and you are our greatest asset. You are the only one who truly understands now, the only one who can sense its rhythms, its needs. You are the stone's keeper, Miller. The Veil Keepers have departed, but they have left their legacy, their trust in your hands." The weight of his words settled upon me. The gray peaks, once my territory as a ranger, were now a cosmic battleground, and I was its unlikely guardian. My life, my purpose, had been irrevocably altered. "We need to monitor it, Thorn," Lena added, her voice practical. "We need to understand its operational parameters, its energy fluctuations. We need to find a way to reinforce the seal, to prevent future breaches, and we need to ensure no one else ever stumbles upon it." "Precisely," Thorn said. "You are no longer mere field researchers, my dear Lena. You are now the front line of humanity's hidden defense. The world must never know of this. Not yet. Not until we understand enough to protect them or to prepare them for the inevitable." We spent the next week in a whirlwind of activity. Lena, with my input, painstakingly pieced together the fragments of data she had managed to record, combining it with the conceptual knowledge I now possessed. We were able to map the stone's energy field with unprecedented accuracy, identify its various resonant frequencies, and understand the subtle shifts that indicated its stability or instability. The pendant, now permanently indigo, seemed to guide me. It hummed gently against my chest, a constant source of quiet power, a direct link to the stone's heartbeat. I could sense the changes in its pulse, the subtle variations in its energy output, even from a distance. I was learning to listen to the stone, to understand its alien language without words. We decided to establish a more permanent, albeit still concealed, base of operations in the Gray Peaks. Lena identified a larger, more stable cave system about 5 miles from the clearing, offering better protection and a less direct exposure to the stone's immediate field of influence. We spent days hauling supplies, setting up advanced monitoring equipment, and creating a truly hidden sanctuary. Thorn, back at his cabin, acted as our remote support, analyzing the data we managed to transmit in sporadic bursts and poring over his ancient texts for further insights. The hum was a constant companion now, a low thrum that was always present, woven into the fabric of my senses. The metallic taste in my mouth, which had been so alarming before, was now a faint, familiar background sensation. I was becoming accustomed to the liminal, to the subtle distortions of reality that surrounded the stone. The challenge of concealing the stone from human discovery was immense. The Park Service was still actively searching for their missing team. Search parties, though avoiding the official restricted zone due to the supposed geological instability, were creeping closer. Lena's drone, carefully disguised and flown from a distance, provided crucial intelligence, allowing us to redirect their efforts, subtly guiding them away from the clearing. We created false trails, scattered misleading markers, even fabricated small seismic events using specialized equipment Lena had brought to reinforce the geological instability narrative. One evening, as we sat in our new cave system, monitoring the stone's steady purple glow on Lena's screen, she turned to me, her face serious. Miller, the Veil Keepers, they didn't just share knowledge, did they? They changed you. What can you do now? What are you capable of? I looked at my hands, flexing my fingers. I didn't have any superhuman strength, no visible powers, but I felt enhanced. My senses were sharper, my mind quicker. I could perceive nuances in the forest that I had never noticed before, feel the subtle energies flowing beneath the earth, and the connection to the stone was undeniable, a living conduit. I can sense the stone, I said, my voice quiet. Its health, its stability. I can feel the liminal thinning, and I think I can influence it. Not directly, not to open or close it at will, but to resonate with it, to help it maintain its equilibrium, to reinforce the seal as the Veil Keepers asked. Elena's eyes widened. That's incredible. A direct psychic link to an extra-dimensional artifact. It's unprecedented. You are, in essence, a living extension of the seal. A human guardian, I murmured, the concept both awe-inspiring and terrifying. A ranger assigned to the ultimate protected resource. We continued our vigil. Days blurred into weeks. The gray peaks became our world, the stone our singular focus. Thorne's sporadic communications were our only link to the outside, his frantic excitement matched by his constant flow of obscure theories and historical parallels. He believed I was the culmination of countless prophecies, a chosen one, a human bridge between dimensions. I found such grand pronouncements unsettling but undeniable. Then one stormy afternoon, as rain lashed against the cave entrance and thunder rumbled through the mountains, Lena's comms crackled to life with Thorne's voice, urgent and strained. Miller, Lena, I've been tracking some unusual activity, military assets. They're moving into the Gray Peaks, heavy equipment, specialized teams. They're not looking for your missing rangers, Miller. They're looking for something else. My blood ran cold. Who, Thorne? What kind of assets? Not Park Service, Thorne clarified, his voice tight with alarm. Black Ops, I'd wager. They've locked down a significant portion of the restricted zone. They're moving with extreme stealth and precision. My contacts are picking up whispers of anomalous energy readings. They're coming for the stone, Miller. Lena and I exchanged a horrified glance. We had done everything to conceal it, to divert attention. But it seemed our efforts had been insufficient, or perhaps the very energies of the battle had left an indelible mark. A signature that a more sophisticated and more sinister entity could detect. How far out are they? Lena asked, her voice grim. Within 20 miles of your position, I estimate, Thorne replied. Moving fast, they'll be at the clearing within 48 hours, possibly sooner if they use air assets. They've detected something, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. Damn it, I cursed, slamming my fist on the rock wall. We just got the seal stable. If they interfere, if they try to extract it or weaponize it. It would be catastrophic, Lena finished, her face pale. They wouldn't understand the true nature of the stone. They'd see it as a power source, an unknown technology. And if they break the seal, even slightly, the void it will return. The hum from the pendant around my neck intensified, echoing the sudden spike of fear and urgency within me. The stone on Lena's screen pulsed with a more vibrant purple, as if sensing the encroaching threat. "We have to stop them," I said, my voice resolute. "We can't let them get their hands on it." "But how?" Lena asked, her eyes darting to the entrance of the cave, then back to me. "We're two people, Miller, against a highly trained, well-equipped military unit. What can we possibly do?" I thought of the Veilkeepers, their silent battle against the void. I thought of the knowledge they had shared, the immense power of the stone. I thought of the responsibility that now rested on my shoulders. "We protect the seal," I stated, my resolve hardening. "No matter the cost. This isn't about us anymore, Lena. This is about everything." We immediately began to plan. Our advantage lay in our knowledge of the terrain and our understanding of the stone's unique properties. We knew the subtle shifts of the liminal, the areas of strongest energy interference. We could use the forest itself as our ally, a maze of natural defenses. Lena, with her incredible technical skills, began to devise traps and diversions not lethal but disorienting. She rigged up motion sensors, designed to trigger localized sonic pulses that would mimic seismic activity, creating chaos for the encroaching soldiers. She prepared modified drone flights, designed to create electromagnetic interference in key areas, disrupting their communications and navigation. I, in turn, focused on the stone. I spent hours at the edge of the clearing, pushing my consciousness outward, resonating with the stone's energy. I wasn't just observing it now, I was becoming one with it, a sentient extension of its power. I felt the subtle vibrations of the earth, the telluric currents Thorn had spoken of, and understood how the stone amplified and channeled them. I could feel the thinning veil, the subtle distortions of reality around the clearing. I realized that the pocket dimensions Thorn and Lena had theorized, the ones that might have absorbed the Park Service team, were not just random occurrences. They were a function of the stone's energy, a localized folding of spacetime. If I could understand how to manipulate these folds, even on a small scale, I could use them to our advantage. On the second morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the rugged peaks, we heard the first faint sounds of their approach. The distant thrum of heavy machinery, the faint crackle of comms, the subtle rustle of highly trained boots on the forest floor. They were coming. We left our cave, moving silently through the dense forest, making our way to the perimeter we had established. Lena deployed her drone, sending it on a low, silent reconnaissance flight. The images streamed back to her handheld device, camouflage-clad figures, heavily armed, moving with practiced stealth. They carried advanced tracking equipment, thermal imagers, and what looked like specialized energy detection gear. They were professionals. "They're splitting into multiple teams," Lena whispered, her eyes glued to the screen. "One lead team, focused on energy readings, seems to be heading directly towards the clearing. The others are sweeping the perimeter, establishing a cordon." "We need to slow them down," I said, my hand resting on the crystal pendant, which now vibrated with a steady, reassuring pulse. "And we need to disorient them, make them think this place is even more unstable than they imagine." We put our plan into action. Lena's drone, flying low and fast, unleashed a burst of powerful electromagnetic interference, scrambling the comms of one of the perimeter teams. Immediately, shouts of confusion erupted, the soldiers struggling with their suddenly useless equipment. Then I focused my will, pouring my amplified consciousness into the telluric currents beneath the earth. I pushed, guided by the pendant's hum, trying to create a localized, non-destructive seismic ripple. The ground around the confused soldiers began to tremble, softly at first, then intensifying into a noticeable shudder. Leaves fell from trees, loose rocks shifted on the ground. It wasn't an earthquake, but it was